Call the meeting to order,
In the
please.
Shawnee Land Sanitary District budget.
We have with us tonight Pastor Phil Roby from Amazing Grace Fellowship, who will deliver the invocation.
Let us pray together. Most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this gorgeous day you gave us to enjoy. I ask your multiplied blessing on our Commonwealth of Virginia and our beloved county of Frederick. May we always be appreciative and mindful of your presence in our lives. Father, I'm mindful this evening of the approach of another school year, and I would ask your blessing upon the administrators, teachers and aides, the support staff, the bus drivers, transportation staff, and most importantly, each of the students. Give them a safe and productive school year. Father God, I thank you for each of these supervisors, county officials, and their subordinates. We appreciate their willingness to represent and serve us in the continuing needs of Frederick County. Father God, may your grace saturate their lives. May your divine wisdom illuminate their minds, enabling them to deal honestly and fairly with all the issues they face. Lord, may your loving kindness surround them and their families as they engage in the interest of Frederick County and its citizens. Finally, Father God, bless this meeting and all who may participate. I ask these favors in the name of your only begotten Son, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Vice Chairman DeHaven, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
And face the flag, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one change, which is the withdrawal of conditional use permit for 13 of Tracy Alt in-home family daycare.
All right, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Supervisor DeHaven, is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The agenda is adopted. Consent agenda, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd offer tab U, which are road resolutions.
All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Supervisor Hest. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Wells. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The consent agenda is approved. Mr. Riley, do we have anyone signed up for citizen comments?
One person, Mr. Chairman, Tim Donovan, to speak to Master Development Plan reference Lake Frederick, Shenandoah.
Would you come forward, please? Give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Tim Donovan and live at Lake Frederick in the Opequon District. And I'd like to talk in favor of the approval of the Master Development Plan for Shenandoah. As you're probably aware, sales and marketing stopped at Shenandoah about 3 years ago. And currently, we have 166 homes and about 300 residents. Looking at assessments and that sort of thing, right now we've been paying about $500,000 in taxes to Frederick County, with really nothing that the county has to do for us. Private streets, do all the maintenance, etc. At build-out, there will be about another 700 active adult homes at Lake Frederick, which will bring, I believe, the tax about over $2 million a year. That's a considerable amount of money. In fact, when we have prospective buyers from New Jersey come down and ask what our taxes are, and we tell them. And then they ask, is that per month? It's a good deal here, really is. I hope that you can prove this so that we can move forward and start living the dream. Thank you.
No one else, Mr. Riley?
No, sir.
Are there any Board of Supervisors comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
when we arrived at the meeting this evening, we had several pieces of correspondence from interested parties and citizens, and I'd like to request that, or make a motion that those communications be entered into the record.
That sounds like a good idea. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor DeHaven. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The letters will be entered. Any other Board of Supervisors comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the minutes of the work session with the Sanitation Authority, July 10th, 2013.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the minutes be approved as written.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. The minutes of the work session with Sanitation Authority, July 10th, 2013 are approved. Next are the regular meeting minutes of July 10th, 2013.
Mr. Chairman, move
Submitted,
approval.
Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to approve by Supervisor Lofton, and a second by Supervisor Hess. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes of the regular meeting, July 10th, 2013 are approved. Next, if I could ask Vice Chairman DeHaven if he would come with me. We have a presentation to make. Pamela S. Bailey.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
The Employee of the Month Award Program recognizes the county's employees as an important and valuable resource. On behalf of the Board of Supervisors, it is my pleasure to present Pamela S. Baber for consideration as Employee of the Month for August 2013. Pam serves the Public Safety Communications Department and is being awarded for her loyalty and commitment to her position as supervisor for the dispatch center. Pam has been a supervisor for the past 10 years. She does all the scheduling for the dispatch center, making sure that all shifts are covered appropriately and fairly. She is always willing to assist other dispatchers and even willing to come in on her days off. She rarely leaves work on time, always making sure that everything is in order for the oncoming shift. Pam always keeps a positive attitude in an environment that is very high stress and fast-paced. Her knowledge and experience can be seen clearly in her ability to train and mentor new employees. Pam cares deeply about her fellow first responders. Pam is to be commended for her initiative and dedication. I will now entertain a motion to approve Pamela S. Baber as Employee of the Month for 2013. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
A motion by Supervisor Lofton. Is there a second?
Second, Mr.
Second
Chairman.
by Supervisor Fisher. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Pamela S. Baber is hereby recognized as the Frederick County Employee for the month of August 2013. The Board of Supervisors extends its gratitude to Pam for her outstanding performance and dedicated service and wishes her continued success in future endeavors. Thank you, sir. Committee appointments. Board of Zoning Appeals, you have a recommendation before you. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend the appointment of Mr. Ron Madigan to the Board of Zoning Appeals to fill the seat of Mr. Robert Wells.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Then Mr. Ron Madigan is appointed, well, I guess,
Recommended to the judge.
recommended to the judge of the Frederick County Circuit Court for final appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Regional Jail Authority, Mr. Ewing is no longer with us, and I believe we have a recommendation, trying to read my notes here.
Mhm.
We have a recommendation from Mr. Wells.
Yes, we'd like to have Mr. Wells replace Mr. Ewing on the jail board.
What is your pleasure?
Move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion to appoint Mr. Wells to the Regional Jail Authority. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Congratulations, Supervisor Wells.
I think.
Russell 150 Community Development Authority, we have a recommendation for a replacement to Mr. Alan Hudson. It's before you. What is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move for approval of appointment of Mr. Walter Akins.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. Mr. Walter Akins is appointed to the Russell 150 Community Development Authority. Extension Leadership Council, Shawnee, are we ready?
No, sir, still working on it.
Parks and Recreation, Stonewall.
Not ready yet, sir.
Order, a Regional Jail Authority, this is a reappointment. I guess Mr. DeHaven's term is up.
Mr.
I heard
Chairman,
him volunteer to do it again.
say I would move to reappoint Mr. Charles S. DeHaven, Jr. to the Regional Jail Authority.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Congratulations, Supervisor DeHaven.
Thanks, sir.
All right, next is a request from the Commissioner of Revenue for a refund. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county attorney is in receipt of the Commissioner's request dated August 1st, 2013, to authorize the treasurer to refund a taxpayer the amount of $3,311.66 for 2011, 2012, and 2013 real estate taxes based upon proper filing of proof of 100% permanent and total disability directly due to military service as required under the Virginia Code change as a result of the constitutional amendment that took effect in 2011. It's respectfully requested that the board approve same.
All right, questions, Mr. Riley? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion by Supervisor Hess to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Discussion? Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Chair votes aye and the motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a resolution of the Board of Supervisors declaring its intent to reimburse itself from the proceeds of one or more financing for certain costs of capital improvements for public safety purposes. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's respectfully requested that the board approve the reimbursement resolution before you in an amount not to exceed $452,347 for the design phase of the Round Hill Community Fire and Rescue Station.
Questions of Mr. Riley? All right, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Wells to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Collins. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye and the motion passes. Next is the Business Friendly Committee report. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have before you the Business Friendly Committee report. As the board will recall, on July 10th, the board voted to accept the report from the Frederick County Business Climate Assessment Citizens Committee. And during the board's discussions, it was the consensus for the chairman and the county administrator to meet to review the recommendations presented and determine which committees or boards would evaluate and provide guidance regarding possible implementation. The following list is the first set of recommendations that we are asking to be considered and eventually adopted. The first is a public information officer. This was a dominant theme through various committees, and it's recommended that this be forwarded to the Human Resources Committee for further evaluation and recommendation to be forwarded to the board at a future meeting. Signage along major routes entering Frederick County. There's a recommendation regarding promoting Frederick County as a business destination was to install signage along Interstate 81 and major routes entering Frederick County such as Route 11, Route 7, Route 50, and Route 522. The committee felt this initiative would show Frederick County as a positive business partner. It is recommended that this be forwarded to the Transportation Committee and the Economic Development Commission for review of signage placement and messaging respectively, and report back to this body. Establishment of an Economic Development Authority. The creation of an Economic Development Authority, or EDA, was identified as an important catalyst to fostering a more competitive business environment for Frederick County. This recommendation should first be referred to the Winchester-Frederick County Economic Development Commission. This would give the commission an opportunity to consider the EDA's role in Frederick County's business attraction and retention efforts and its relationship to the current Economic Development Commission. Review and evaluation of the Master Development Plan process. The Land Use and Development Subcommittee recommended the elimination of the Master Development Plan process. They felt this process was already incorporated in other existing ordinances and results in a duplicative process. The reevaluation of the current master development process would be appropriate. This recommendation should be referred to the Planning Commission for initial evaluation by the Development Review and Regulations Committee and the entire Planning Commission with a recommendation back to this body. Simplification of the landscape ordinance. This was another issue that came out of the Land Use and Development Subcommittee and recommended a complete review and reevaluation of the Frederick County Buffers and Landscaping Ordinance to provide a well-defined purpose to allow for flexibility in project site landscaping, tree preservation, and effective development buffers. Reevaluation of the current landscaping ordinance would be appropriate. This recommendation should be referred to the Planning Commission for initial evaluation by the Development Review and Regulations Committee and the entire Planning Commission with a recommendation back to this body. Reduction in proffer requirements. The Land Use and Development Subcommittee recommended a reduction in the proffer requirements for future rezoning applications as well as amendments to the existing proffers in order to create viable projects that will deliver needed transportation improvements and other benefits. As stated, the reevaluation of the development impact model taking into account current economic conditions would be appropriate. This recommendation should be referred to the Development Impact Model Oversight Committee for evaluation and recommendation to the board. Staff, again, is seeking the board's action to refer these items as indicated. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Riley? We believe we did what you asked us to do, and this is an update. I think I would only add that Mr. Riley passed along instructions that these things don't get bottled up in committee. They come out of there with something and back to us eventually. They just don't go there and die. Are we on track? Supervisor Lofton.
Is it appropriate to make some comments?
Yes, sir.
Number one, the public information officer, I would like to see that when that is referred to the HR committee, that they consider the study of existing personnel and the ability to task one with that duty, along with whatever other studies they may be doing, and also signage along major routes. Can we ask that they look at some other cliche besides Frederick County is open for business?
It's just an example.
I know, but I hope we don't come up with that because that is so stale and overused. I just don't think it has any effect at all.
I'm sure the chairman of those committees were taking notes. Anything else? If we have anything to report, is this meet muster with an update? I think you're there, Mr. Riley.
Would the board mind adopting the committee report so I can send these recommendations forward?
Do that we did not do that?
I don't believe we did.
I thought we did.
I thought we accepted the report, but if you'd like to move that we move forward with these recommendations, I'd be willing to make that motion.
Is that motion perfected as you,
Yes, sir. If we could move the business-friendly committee report and adopt it, that would send me off in the direction I need to go in with these recommendations.
is that your
Amend my
motion?
motion, so moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion.
I'd like to note that the HR Committee Chairman has noted Mr. Lofton's suggestion.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The motion passes. Does that conclude, Mr. Riley?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, to Human Resources Committee, Supervisor Hess.
The HR Committee met on August the 2nd. The committee brings forward to the board a recommendation for the approval of a resolution to elect not to participate in the Virginia Local Disability Plan through the Virginia Retirement System. Electing not to participate in this plan through the VRS will provide the county with flexibility in choosing insurance carriers. This would permit staff to evaluate alternatives that are code compliant and more affordable. There are at least 2 carriers, I might add, that currently offer plans that are in compliance. I might note, and I believe it says so in the resolution, that this is kind of an irreversible decision not to participate in that. We discussed this at length in the committee and felt that the rates charged under the Virginia Retirement System plan were too high, and they were guaranteed only for 6 months, whereas the commercial carriers not only have a lower rate, they're willing to guarantee that rate for a longer period of time. So I believe you have a resolution in your packet, and I'd like to so move that the board adopt that resolution.
We have a motion to adopt the resolution. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Collins. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The other item, of course, was approved by the board earlier in the Employee of the Month recommendation, and the other items considered do not require action on the part of the board.
That concludes your report?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll move on to Public Works.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Before we move on, is it appropriate to make a comment about the items not requiring action? To pass those, or should I pass those along to the HR Committee for?
Yes.
I noticed that they're going to take the recommendation of the Public Safety Committee dealing with the Solutions for Fire and Rescue Department. I'm sure they will, but I hope the HR Committee looks at all options and not just moving forward with the old paradigm of how the fire and rescue has been operated in the past, but look at for some innovative solutions so that we might be able to better position ourselves, A, to retain and recruit personnel, but also look at reducing the cost associated with that operation.
Yeah, Gary, this subject did receive considerable discussion, and this is kind of a stopgap measure, I think, and certainly
right.
alternatives can be considered in the future.
Good, thank you.
Now, they are looking at the referral from Public Safety, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I understand that, and the referral was, like Supervisor Hess said, a stopgap measure.
Okay.
But I want to make sure we move forward. That's not, we don't feel
You
that's.
only confused me in that the referral, you ask, are we looking at it? And if they referred it to them, I didn't know what the nature of the
Yeah.
question was.
I'm sorry, but I was looking forward to the referral and on the action on that, just to give the input now while I'm thinking about it. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
All right. Other comments? We'll move on to Public Works.
Mr. Chairman, Public Works met on Tuesday, August the 6th, and we have a carry-forward request for the design of the Round Hill Fire and Rescue Station and associated social hall, and this design is in progress. The committee unanimously approved a request to carry forward funds in the amount of $403,648 to complete the design of the new Round Hill Fire and Rescue Station and associated social hall. And I would make that motion to carry forward those funds.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion passes.
That completes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Next is a report on joint finance. Mr. Riley has agreed to deliver that for Supervisor DeHaven and I. Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joint Finance Committee met on August 7th at 8 a.m. All members were present. First action item is the Joint Judicial Center Improvement Contract. The city manager provided a brief overview of the January 2nd, 2013 meeting with Judge Wetzel regarding the project and the actions taken to date to get staff input regarding space needs. The request for proposal was released on March 26, 2013, with proposals due May 9, 2013. Interviews of shortlisted firms were conducted on June 13, 2013, and Mosley Architects was the selected firm. The city manager stated there would be 2 tasks to be completed before the project was ready for construction. Task 1 would include a space needs study of the existing building footprint at a price of $80,000. Task 2 would be completion of the design drawings at a price of $100,000. Upon a motion by Mr. DeHaven, seconded by Mr. Willingham, the committee recommended each governing body appropriate $40,000 each to cover the cost of Task 1, with results to be reviewed before final approval of the project.
Questions of Mr. Riley? Supervisor DeHaven, would you like to take the lead?
I would, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we appropriate $40,000 to cover the cost of the space needs analysis for the Joint Judicial Center.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Collins.
This might be putting a little bit of the cart before the horse, but we're about to spend $40,000 on a space needs study for the courthouse, and we also have coming through the pike the potential of this building and the building adjacent being sold if things happen in the future, but it's all in kind of uncertainty. I'm not sure that this, attached with what else is going on with potential sales of these 2 properties, this is something we shouldn't spend the we can spend $40,000 now, and they're going to look at our current footprint, and then 6 months from now, a year from now, it changes the entire dynamics by having other buildings available for that footprint, and we have to spend another $80,000. So I'm not sure that this is the appropriate time to do this, given some of the things that may or may not happen in the future.
I will ask Administrator Riley and Supervisor DeHaven to chime in after me if I don't get it quite right. That issue was raised and debated and discussed. Most of this is an additional courtroom. That took away most of the options that might compete for the space. And the analysis is to be within the existing footprint, but its primary focus was an additional courtroom. You wouldn't locate one courtroom outside the other courtrooms.
I know one judge who does, but that's...
Y'all were there. I know we talked about it, but...
It was the first concern raised, and at the end of the day, the consensus was that we needed to concentrate on the existing footprint of the existing building.
And make sure we knew what it was that was needed, no matter where it was.
I understand, and I'm not trying to dissuade from all this, but I think that, I'm glad that was brought up at that meeting. I know that...
And the discussion was that the emphasis would be on the needs and not the wants.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Lofton?
Would it be appropriate to ask, we've got this broken down into Task 1 and Task 2. I can see where moving ahead with Task 1 might be beneficial because that's going to include a space needs study of the existing building footprint. So that kind of leads into Supervisor Collins' concern about should we be looking at this now. It appears to me that would tell us what kind of needs are there and actually if the existing footprint would accommodate all those needs. But Task 2, completion of design drawings, is there any way we can separate those two and say we support Task 1, but we would like to wait and...
The recommendation of the committee was that we accomplish Task 1 and reconvene and evaluate the results before moving forward.
You're right. Okay. Just want to make sure that that's what we were looking at.
That's not what came into the room, it's what went out of the room.
Okay.
Exactly what you said.
Mr. Chairman, do we know if the city's approved their portion of the fee?
I believe that it was indicated to us that they had. Mr. Riley, would that be your conclusion?
I would assume that they have, Mr. Hess, but I can't say unequivocally yes.
It's a project for which they are moving forward with a bond issue. But if this project were not to proceed for that bond issue, is my understanding, they had a litany of lists that they could move monies to. But right now, they're reserving some of that borrowing for this potential project.
So we would see task 2 coming back. I guess the reason I'm confused is that last sentence says reviewed before final approval of the project. Kind of struck me as, are we actually going to be looking at saying we're going to approve it all and then we'll approve the second portion of it? We're just asking for that 140,000 task 1 at this time.
My representation of the presence of the city at the table was accommodating, willing to listen to our concerns and willing to go about it in ways that were compatible with our thought processes.
Okay.
Anybody else disagree? Other discussion? Okay, then we'll vote. Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Collins?
Aye.
Supervisor Hess?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion passes.
The rest of the information contained in the report is for your information. There is an ongoing dialogue with reference to EDC, and the report is quite voluminous with reference to that dialogue, but it is nowhere resolved.
With no disrespect to Mr. Tibbs, there's a section in here on the EDC where I'm not sure what I said, but what was meant was that the city was welcomed and encouraged to tell us if their value for the dollar spent on EDC was not there, and we would not expect them to spend money for which they didn't think they got return. Probably the way I talk, Mr. Tibbs had trouble figuring out how to write it, but that's what it was meant, if you wonder what that particular paragraph was about. Are there any questions on the balance of the report? If not, we'll move on to public hearings. Okay. First public hearing is an outdoor festival permit request of Belle Grove Plantation. Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an outdoor festival permit request from Belle Grove Plantation. This is for the Belle Grove Wine Festival, and this is pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals. The festival will be held on Saturday, September 7th, 2013, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the grounds of Belle Grove Plantation, 336 Belle Grove Road, Middletown, Virginia. Property is owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Riley? Is there a representative here who would like to speak? All right, seeing no one, we'll go to public hearing. This is a public hearing for an outdoor festival permit request of Belle Grove Plantation, Belle Grove Wine Festival, pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals, Section 86.3, permit required. Application, issuance or denial, fee for an outdoor festival permit. Festival to be held on Saturday, September the 7th, 2013, from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the grounds of Belle Grove Plantation, 336 Belle Grove Road, Middletown, Virginia, property owned by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this outdoor festival permit request? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, having seen many of these festivals take place at Belle Grove, not having any comments about adverse impact on the community, but always hearing good things about the festivals that Belle Grove has been a part of, I would make a motion to approve the application for an outdoor festival permit for the Belle Grove Wine Festival.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. I would add to what Supervisor Lofton said, these have positive economic impact on the community. So I've always been told. All right. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells. Chair votes aye, and the outdoor festival permit request of Belle Grove is approved. Next is another outdoor festival permit request of Monica Smith, Team Scrub. Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an outdoor festival permit request of Monica Smith. This is a Relay for Life motorcycle show and ride, and this is pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals. The festival is to be held on Saturday, September the 28th, 2013, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the grounds of Winchester Harley-Davidson, 140 Independence Drive, Winchester, Virginia. Property is owned by Jobali LLC. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Riley?
Mr. Chairman, I have a, looking over this permit, is this actually something that we need to have a permit for? Because there's very little, if anything, that they're doing other than meeting at the Harley-Davidson shop and letting people walk past their motorcycles, if that's how I read the description of this.
I think that between the county attorney and the landowner, that they thought this would be an appropriate announcement of a festival permit, and we thought fell within the guidelines, even though it was,
marginal.
very limited.
Understood.
Other questions? Supervisor Lofton?
And I understand that Groves is not the actual sponsor of this, but I was wondering, would that fit under there? Because we've given him an annual permit, I believe, have we not?
We asked that question, but Harley-Davidson felt that it would be more appropriate for them to go under their own permit.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll open the public hearing to consider outdoor festival permit request of Monica Smith, Team Scrub, Relay for Life, motorcycle show and ride pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals, Section 86.3, permit required, application issuance or denial, fee for an outdoor festival permit. Festival will be held on Saturday, September the 28th, 2013, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the grounds of the Winchester Harley-Davis, 140 Independence Drive, Winchester, Virginia, property owned by Jobali LLC. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this outdoor festival permit? If so, would you please come to the podium, name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
I'm Monica. I'm the one that's trying to get the permit. I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions for me. I didn't want you to think I didn't show up.
After the public hearing, if we have any, we'll call you up.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. This is Shawnee.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I would move for approval of outdoor festival permit request of Monica Smith, Team Scrub, Relay for Life, motorcycle show and ride.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Collins?
Aye.
Supervisor Hess? And I'm sorry that I did not, Chairman votes aye. I'm sorry I did not remember after the announcement before the public hearing to ask if you wanted to say anything. If you'd like to come up, if you have anything to say, I'll let you. It was an oversight on my part. It's your chance to plug. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next outdoor festival permit request of Concern Hotline. Mr. Riley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an outdoor festival permit request for Concern Hotline, the 14th annual Friday Fish Fry. And this is pursuant to Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals. And this is a festival to be held on Friday, September 6, 2013, from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the grounds of Groves, Winchester Harley-Davidson, 140 Independence Drive, Winchester, Virginia, property owned by Jobali LLC. I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Questions from Mr. Riley? All right, hearing none, we'll open the public hearing on the outdoor festival permit request of Concern Hotline, 14th annual Friday Fish Fry, pursuant to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 86, Festivals, Section 86.3, permit required, application, issuance, or denial fee for an outdoor festival permit. Festival to be held on Friday, September the 6th, 2013, from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the grounds of the Grove, Winchester, Harley-Davidson, 140 Independence Drive, Winchester, Virginia, property owned by Jubilee LLC. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this application? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and once again, I forgot to ask the applicant if they wanted to speak. Is there a representative here? Did you want to speak? Okay. My apologies. This is Shawnee, right?
Yes, sir. This event has had a very positive, I think, effect and has been run very well in the past, so I would move for approval of outdoor festival permit request of concern hotline, 14th annual Friday fish fry.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Collins. Any discussion? Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the outdoor festival permit request of concern hotline is approved. Next is an ordinance to amend the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165, taxation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here you come. Or is that you?
It's me.
All right, go ahead.
I would be more than happy to present this. This is an amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 155, Taxation, Article 2, Special Assessments for Agriculture, Horticulture, Forest, and Open Space Real Estate, Sections 15.9 Findings, so on and so forth, with reference to rollback taxes imposed. The purpose of these amendments is to defer the payment of rollback taxes until the property's use changes rather than at the time the rezoning classification changes. As you will recall, this process started last November with Mr. Minshew, or Delegate Minshew, taking this on as an amendment to the state code with reference to this finding. And we are at the end of this process, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions with reference to this.
Questions, Mr. Riley? The only question I sort of had as I reflected on it was when we were batting this thing around, we commonly use the term occupancy, and it hinges on change of use. Change of use is defined how?
When it goes from agriculture to an active,
At what point in time does that happen? When somebody starts occupying it?
probably when they file for, after the rezoning is approved, and when we would receive a site plan to start the active development of the property.
As we move forward, if there's a role for us to play in fine tuning that, there's no use to hold it up. Would somebody let us know what's the trigger? I had it in my head, occupancy, and I didn't see that term, so I thought maybe it's before then. I don't know. Go ahead, Supervisor
Unless I'm
DeHaven.
mistaken, Mr. Chairman, the verbiage I saw stated that when the property ceased to be eligible for land use, which would be...
Is that clear?
Well, I think it is, but it may need some definition. I mean,
It was
is
only
that
my intent
occupancy,
to help
which...
staff make sure that they weren't left out there not knowing when it was, if there was a role for us to play. I was not trying to hold up the process. So if it's worth anything,
That's a good question.
okay, any other questions of Mr. Riley? If not, then we'll go to public hearing. This is a public hearing to consider an ordinance to amend the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165, or 155, Taxation, Article 2, Special Assessments for Agriculture, Horticultural, Forest, or Open Space Real Estate, Section 155-9, Findings, 155-10, Eligibility for Special Assessments, Applications, Reevaluations, Section 155-13, Rollback Tax Imposed, and Section 155-14, Changes in Status. The purpose of these amendments is to defer the payment of rollback taxes until the property's use changes rather than at the time the rezoning classification changes. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this ordinance to amend the Frederick County Code of Taxation? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the amendment the ordinance amendment as written.
We have a motion to approve by Supervisor Collins. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. Discussion.
Yeah, do we have other situations that aren't covered under this change in the statute? For instance, residential property being rezoned commercial, and then they start paying taxes based upon the rezoning?
Anybody on the administrative or legal side of the house know if the issue ever gets raised?
Well, I think this is more of an issue of people continuing to be able to farm their property even when the zoning changes, and they're not in a position where they have to pay rollback taxes when the zoning changes, which, you know, the whole impetus behind all of this through the business, I can't remember the name of that particular committee, but was to provide incentives for landowners, not necessarily developers, to get their property better positioned for development without having to pay rollback taxes if they weren't interested in conveying the property at that time. It has nothing to do with changes in use from residential to commercial or anything else. It's more.
Well, I know this one doesn't, but don't people find themselves in a similar situation if they have a property that's zoned residential? There is some thought being given to turn it into a commercial property. They go through rezoning, and then the property is not put into commercial use, but is continued to be used as a residence. I know it's not covered in this, but I just wondered if that's something we also need to look at. And I would assume, like the item we considered here, would probably take action by the state legislature.
Well, I would think, based on the number of gyrations we went through in committee at the General Assembly, that it would be a monumental task to try and get that through. This was hard enough, and it was simple.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Fisher.
maybe this will help, and hopefully I have this correct, but we're talking about the land use, not the rezoning. So every fall, the Commissioner of Revenue sends out a land use application. As long as that form's filled out and found to be acceptable, that property is in land use for agricultural purposes. It continues in that program, even though maybe it was been rezoned to something else. So that's the use. It's the land use that gives through the Commissioner of Revenue's office.
Is the Commissioner still here? Or she depart? Okay. I think there's been some changes, and you may be 100% correct, or you might be, I'm just not sure that, do you still qualify for land use once you're rezoned? I thought that got changed a few years back.
This changed. This changed it.
Mr. Chairman, that's what this change was about. Until the 2013 General Assembly session, the rezoning automatically kicked you out of land use.
Yes.
And the legislation that Delegate Minshew got through changed that so that when you were no longer otherwise eligible for land use, irrespective of the zoning designation, then and only then, at local option, thus the requirement for this ordinance, did the property owner then get kicked out of land use.
We all there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's vote. Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye, and the ordinance is amended. Next is another ordinance to amend the Frederick County Code, Chapter 158, Vehicles and Traffic. Is that you, Mr. Riley, or?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can introduce it. This is an ordinance to amend the Frederick County Code, Chapter 158, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 2, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, and Section 158-4D, General Restrictions. This proposed amendment is minor in nature and would make it unlawful for any person to park any vehicle on any street or highway without displaying a current state license or a current state inspection sticker. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or defer to Mr. Williams if there's further questions on this issue.
Questions of Mr. Riley?
Essentially, aren't we correcting a drafting error?
Yes, sir.
questions of county attorney? Hearing none, we'll go to public hearing. This is a public hearing. Ordinance to amend Frederick County Code, Chapter 158, Vehicles and Traffic, Article 2, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, Section 158-4D, General Restrictions. This proposed amendment is minor in nature and would make it unlawful for any person to park any vehicle on any street or highway without displaying a current state license or a current state inspection sticker. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this ordinance amendment? Seeing no one, will close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move for approval.
We have a motion to approve, Supervisor DeHaven. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye, and the ordinance is amended. Next, we have a public hearing on a conditional use permit 03-13 of Verizon Wireless and Bertha McAwee Trust. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This proposed conditional use permit is to enable construction of a 195-foot monopole telecommunications facility and equipment shelter. The property is located at 2250 Back Mountain Road, which is Route 600. It is zoned RA, and it is located in the Back Creek Magisterial District. The property is surrounded by RA zone property, which is rural areas with residential and vacant. Also to the west, surrounded by R5, which is the residential recreation community, which is Shawnee Land. If I could turn your attention to the map on the left to give you an idea where this property is located. It's outlined, of course, in black. The small red dot on the top there is where the tower is going to be located. The property is approximately 218-acre site for this telecommunications tower. The comprehensive policy plan of Frederick County, which is a guidance for any land use actions, designates this area to remain rural in character, and is not part of any long-term land use studies currently going on in Frederick County. As you're aware of, the zoning ordinance requires that all proposed telecommunications towers be subject to additional performance standards to promote the orderly economic development, mitigate any negative impacts to adjoining properties, residential properties, or land use patterns. Also to mitigate any areas that may be of significant scenic areas and properties of significant historical values. The Frederick County Historical Resource Board, or HRAB, reviewed this application for a conditional use permit and identified 3 properties that are significant in historical value, including one on the site where this telecommunications facility will be located. In your agenda, you'll see that the HRB required a property inventory form, or PIF, which points out that some of the historical significant properties that were located with this proposed telecommunications tower, and that is one of the, obviously, review agency comment. This telecommunication tower is positioned to provide for current and any future needs in this area of Frederick County. Should the Board of Supervisors find this application to be appropriate, the following conditions should be applied to the conditional use permit. 1, I'll review agency comments and requirements to comply with at all times. Number 2, the tower should be available for co-location of personal wireless service providers. Number 3, a minor site plan should be approved by Frederick County. Number 4, the tower shall be removed by the applicant or property owner within 12 months of abandonment of operation. Number 5, an event the telecommunication tower is not erected within 12 months of this approved conditional use permit, the conditional use permit will be deemed invalid. And number 6, any expansion or modification of this conditional use permit will require a new conditional use permit. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this application at its July meeting. There were no comments regarding this conditional use permit. The Planning Commission did, at the time the applicant had provide the PIF, which is included in your package identifying those historical properties. There is representation here from the Verizon Wireless company on this proposed conditional use permit. And I'll answer any questions that you may have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher?
Mr. Chairman, is there any reason why the comments received from the Winchester Regional Airport Executive Director were not included in the conditions?
They, as always, Mr. Fisher, they have talked about lighting the tower. It is part of the conditional use permit as a reviewing agency. Obviously, if we need to, if you feel it's necessary to amend it to add the conditions, we can all do that, but we always treat it as a reviewing agency. The applicant is aware of that.
The first comment, Mark.
Oh,
Your first comment says all review agencies shall be complied with.
oh,
It captures it.
yes.
You're sure? Because we've always, in my memory is that it's always been an additional condition that's been placed. So somebody can't say, well, we didn't read the fine print. We've always done it before. If you tell me that's comply with the two requirements of the airport executive director, I'll be satisfied.
I think we're fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The applicant would like to address?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Tracy Thiemak. I'm the zoning agent for Verizon Wireless. Also with me tonight are Stephanie Petway, the site acquisition manager, and Paul Dugan, our radio frequency specialist. And we're here primarily to answer any specific questions you may have. But I think your packet includes our application in whole. I just wanted to, since we have made 2 additional submissions since the Planning Commission hearing, I wanted to be available to answer any questions you had.
Questions of the applicant? Supervisor Lofton?
I see that the application says his property is located at the 2250 Back Mountain Road.
That's correct.
Why then do I see that the access to this property is off Rappahannock Trail?
Because it's actually very much towards the rear of the property. It's along the ridge line. It's actually closer to the Shawnee, I believe it's called the Shawnee land, that in the access is through there. I think it's Tomahawk Drive, and you wind back. That's the most direct access to the property, so we wouldn't have to lay additional gravel roads for construction inlet.
My next question would be, have you appeared before the Shawnee Land Sanitary District Committee to find out if, in fact, they are aware that you're looking to access through their private street network that they pay for with their dues?
I'll let Stephanie answer this one. She was the site act in charge of it, but I do believe we met with members of the Shawnee community who did support the tower and the construction of the tower, given that it is going to provide service. They are going to be the group that gets the most benefit, direct benefit from both internet and the 4G and 3G LTE service of this tower. But Stephanie?
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Petway, representing Verizon Wireless. I have to be honest with you, I don't think we've had that conversation concerning the access. We will be working with VDOT and as part of the site plan process to access it. This would be the shortest distance for us to get to the site, and that's why we're locating our entrance from that road as opposed to off of Back Mountain.
I understand that, but you're aware that, like I say, that is a private street network that the residents up there pay dues to have those streets maintained. And I would like to think, because we're stipulating that you have to allow co-locators on that tower, and we don't know how much construction traffic and how much maintenance traffic are going to be putting stress on those roadways, and I'm just wondering if you have any idea how much you're going to contribute to that upkeep of those roadways.
No, I'm not aware of that this time. I won't be able to give you an answer concerning that.
Okay.
What would you do if you couldn't get that access or didn't want to do whatever the owners of those private streets want you to? Are you going to come in off Back Mountain?
We would try and work off Back Mountain. It would be much more expensive because it would be much more of a longer road for us to get there. But we would work probably to get an alternate access off of Back Mountain Road, as well as work with VDOT in order to get the entrance from that road.
From Back Mountain?
Yes.
VDOT won't have anything to do with what Mr. Lofton is talking about.
From Back Mountain Road either.
No, Back Mountain they would.
Yes.
Yes. I guess he's trying to warn you. my query would be, is your project dead if you can't use those private streets?
No,
Okay.
no. It would be a much more expensive site, but no, we really need the site, and we would have to put the extra funds into it in order to get access off of Back Mountain Road if we cannot get access off of the smaller road closest to it.
Other questions of the applicant? Thank you.
And just to supplement, the traffic that's going to be generated from this site, the majority of the traffic will be during the construction period when the tower is actually raised, and then on a month-to-month basis, it will be 1, maybe 2 maintenance visits per month. It'll be a single maintenance provider in an SUV, so the traffic is minimal once the tower is actually up and active.
You know, just one more time, Mr. Lofton's trying to make sure you know we don't decide who uses those
Absolutely.
roads. They do. Thank you.
Great.
We'll open the public hearing. It is a conditional use permit 03-13 of Verizon Wireless and Bertha McElwee Trust, submitted by Donahue and Stearns PLC for a 190-foot tower and equipment shelter. The property is located at 2250 Back Mountain Road, Route 600, and is identified with property identification number 49-A-28 in the Back Creek Magisterial District. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this conditional use permit? Yes, sir. Would you come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please?
My name is Barry Van Meter. I'm the chairman of the Shawnee Land and Sanitary District Advisory Committee. Some of my comments today were already addressed by Mr. Lofton. We met in committee last Monday, and we would like to vote to object to the current plan. We would like to talk about some of the things, the needs. I'm a current Verizon user. I live in Shawnee Land, and also part of my job is I travel the roads quite frequently. I have good service. There's only 2 spots in Shawnee Land that I do not have good service at with the Verizon. The only advantage that we might have from this tower would be the increase in the internet, the 4G. However, the financial plans for the Verizon data packages are not competitive with their current competitors, the Winchester Wireless, Wave2Net, or HughesNet. So the need for this tower for us is minimal. That being said, access is our primary concern. I spoke with Mr. Lofton about this. We are a sanitary district. These roads are private. As already mentioned, the sanitary fees are what maintain the roads. We're now being asked to support commercial traffic for a very minimal gain. The biggest concern that we have right now is not Verizon. As they say in their packet, they're only going to be using it maintenance on monthly. However, co-location, we might have more people using this tower. Now that we have more providers, we have more traffic. This is a concern because this year already we have tarred and chipped Tomahawk Trail, Cherokee Trail, and Shenandoah Trail. The heat and just the routine residential traffic, we've had to go back and do those roads because they've been damaged. The concern here is Verizon has made no provision to pay any access fees or improve the roads. Rappahannock is a single lane road with very rough access for the construction equipment that will be required to get there. The other option is Assateague Trail, and that is a dirt road that they would have to improve. The other thing we have is the visual impact of this tower. According to their statement, there is very little impact from the northeast and the south. However, all of the impact is from the west. It sits on a ridge. It sits just above the ridge line. The tower itself, while a visual nuisance, is not an issue. You will look at it for a little while and then it will disappear. The problem is we will have an anti-aircraft strobe light on top of this. From several hundred feet away, this light is going to be at eye level for the houses going up the side of the mountain across from the lake. So in the winter months, Tom Tom Trail, Apache Trail, Cherokee Court will all have these lights flashing in their living room windows. Time short. Ideally, we would like to see Verizon make provisions to pay either sanitary district fees, or we would like to see the tower slid down approximately a half mile the same ridge, access be brought off Back Ridge Road, a state-maintained highway, and that would alleviate the visual impact. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, would you come forward, please? Name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Yes, hello, I'm Cindy Bowman. Excuse me, I live on Rappahannock Trail and have been there with my husband since 1987. Excuse me. Many health studies concentrate on the incidence of cancer around cell towers and other high-voltage electromagnetic fields, or EMFs. Cancer isn't the only health risk from EMFs. Electrical hypersensitivity, or EH, is a real and debilitating lifelong condition, and it's caused by exposure to EMFs emanating from any electronic. It isn't one or two electronics that cause EH, it's one or two too many. We all have a different threshold. We don't know what that threshold is until we cross it. I crossed my threshold in 2004. Because of this, I can no longer work. I experienced over 40 physiological changes and could not find medical help locally. The best solution for me is EMF avoidance. I'm safe when I'm home. If a cell tower begins operating close to my home, it will no longer be my safe haven. I'm not against technology, but we should be able to have technology without added health risks. Verizon's plans did not include two vital pieces of information I sought. Where will the tower's output beam be trained? And two, what is the expected voltage of the red pulsing light? My research shows that the voltage can be 1,000 volts or more emitted with each pulse. There is a very inexpensive filtering coil called an RF choke that can be installed on any cell tower, and along with adequate wiring to carry return current to the substation will reduce the high frequency and high voltage impulses. In my research, I could find no requirements by Frederick County for the installation of these safety devices. In my experiences with Verizon, I've been impressed by their excellent customer service policies. RF choke installation and adequate current return wiring on all Verizon towers would complement these policies by helping to protect those that live and work nearby. I'm from the Midwest, and I know that people there frequently have to be outside searching for cell signals. If a reliable cell service is difficult to obtain on flat land, what makes us think we can achieve it here in the mountains? Property and resale values are also a concern. Shawnee land values are modest, and any devaluation due to cell tower placement would be a big disadvantage to property owners. I believe Verizon can find a different lot on which to build. In comparison with Lake Holiday, it's evident that cell towers don't have to be sited directly above the communities they serve. I urge the board to reject this permit so Verizon can choose a different lot and site not directly over Shawnee land due to the number of people who would be negatively affected in so many ways. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir, would you come forward? Name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Yes, Tom Rosenberger, Back Creek District. I have the property directly adjacent to the proposed site, north of it, and I use Verizon service, and there's a lot of dead spaces, especially when I go south of my house, going in towards Strasburg. I have a dead zone starting about Mountain Falls Park, which is 5 miles south, and pretty much goes into 81 on the north side. So I'm in favor of the new cell tower. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no one, will close the public hearing. Would you folks from Verizon like to respond to anything that we heard?
I can have Mr. Dugan speak to this, but we also do have the EMF report that was prepared by our RF engineers documenting that per the FCC standards and the maximum permissible exposure limits, that this tower's emissions will be well below 1% of the maximum permitted exposure. And I can submit that for your review. And I'm happy to have any specific questions about the report or about that number directed to Mr. Dugan. But we do have that for you tonight, along with a copy of his resume. I'll leave that with Mr. Sharon.
Anything else or questions of the applicant? Don't go away yet. Anyone? I guess I should have let you sit down.
It's fine. I can come back.
A question I have for staff. there were a few things here that I heard for the first time having to do with cell towers. Does everybody just perform those tests, or do we need to start looking into that issue? There must be a standard that people are trying to stay below there, and I didn't even know that it existed. So,
We've not evaluated the tests and the radiation. We've gone with the belief that the FCC is regulating it and it complies with the licensing, but we can't speak to the radiation in that aspect.
they don't have a standard. They regulate it as well? Or should I ask the applicant for general information?
I think the applicant.
If they put out a standard, but they're not regulating, then should we? If they're putting out a standard and they're regulating, then I guess maybe that's a different story. That's my query.
I don't have a response. From a land use perspective, we've never evaluated that.
Yes. The question is, do the people that put out the standard regulate it and make you stay within it?
Absolutely. The Federal Communications Commission, when we register this tower so that Verizon and any future co-locators that are on it broadcast from it, we have to document to the FCC that we are within the maximum permissible exposure limits. So they do regulate it. It is federally mandated limits. Might be able to give you some more specific information.
Good evening. Paul Dugan. I am an independent consulting engineer with the firm Millennium Engineering. Just let me take a brief moment to just touch on the issue of electromagnetic fields. The proposed facility, the ground level exposure anywhere near the base of the proposed facility will be hundreds of times below what's considered safe levels of electromagnetic fields. The FCC sets a national standard for compliance with electromagnetic fields, and Verizon Wireless provides me their antenna configuration and operating parameters, and I perform calculations based on FCC prescribed methodologies to determine what the upper limit fields would be anywhere near the base of the proposed facility. I've confirmed these calculations endlessly with a calibrated instrument. Again, the FCC sets the national standard. It will comply hundreds of times below what's considered safe levels of electromagnetic fields. The FCC did not arbitrarily set their own standard based on their own independent research, but they adopted the recommendations of organizations that have done research in that area.
Questions? Sir. Back Creek.
I'm sorry. Did you have something else you wanted to add?
I think he was.
Okay. Looking for questions? Mr. Chairman, attending the Sanitary District Committee and hearing their concerns and looking at the proposal as it stands right now, I can't favor this request because of a couple of reasons. Number one, as you've heard, the private roads are paid for by the residents who utilize those roadways to access their homes. Those roads were built long ago into very poor standards, and so it doesn't take much for them to become in a deteriorated shape. Now, Verizon may say they're only going to, after construction, and I don't know what kind of vehicles, I doubt if they're going to be pickups putting up those tower sections, but they're going to be heavy-duty vehicles moving that tower up there for construction. After that, there may be light-duty vehicles, but again, if we co-locate, we don't know how many more vehicles might be going up there, so the roads are a very big concern for the residents as well as myself. Also, the visual impact, it appears that moving this tower might reduce the visual impact to the residents up there. And I think, I'm not sure exactly how I would go about this, but what I would like to do is find a way to give Verizon an opportunity to address these concerns with the Sanitary District Committee to their satisfaction, the access and the possible movement of the tower to see how that would affect their coverage area. Would it be appropriate to make a motion at this time to table this request for 45 days or until?
I think the motion to table is appropriate. Are the time limits okay?
You would probably need to table it because of our schedule to a specific board meeting date, which would be September 9th would be your next board meeting. or the subsequent one, which would be the second Wednesday in October.
May I ask Verizon, would the September 9th board meeting give you the opportunity that you need to work out the issues that we've been raising?
Yes, we can, that's fine. I do want to respond to just the topic of moving the tower. When we're working with a tower, even of this height and at this altitude and along the ridge, we are talking about when the site acquisition manager goes out to find a parcel, we are looking at a search ring of sometimes 1.5 miles in radius. So the ability to move it one way or the other, there isn't going to be, in order to provide the service that you saw on the RF propagation maps that this particular location achieves, that is going to affect, it may cause a greater gap in service and may not produce the most effective fill of that coverage gap. So, but as far as talking to sanitation about the roads and everything, we can definitely do that, and that will give us ample time before the next board meeting to talk to the Shawnee Land.
Well, could I ask you two things then? Number one, work with the Shawnee Land Sanitary District Committee about roadway usage. And also, secondly, I understand what you're talking about coverage area, but would it be appropriate to ask you to go ahead and show us what that coverage would look like if it was
Absolutely. We
moved?
can get propagation studies that show you so that we can see what the fill coverage would be, the differential there. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think also implied in Supervisor Lofton's query is, do you want to go try to work some things out with folks, or do you want us to not like what you're giving us?
I think the choice there is clear.
Try is the September 9th enough time?
Yes.
I think that's part of what.
Yeah, that's what I asked.
Did I waffle around that okay?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a clear-cut answer. I wish the bar was that easy. That would be great if we could have that time to talk to them and come to a resolution, and then we can get you that information even before we present to you next time.
Supervisor Lofton, the appropriate action would be a postpone.
Oh, okay, right, you're right, because that table would have to be taken up at the same meeting. Right, okay, so with that in mind, I would make a motion to postpone the vote on the conditional use permit number 03-13 of Verizon Wireless to the September 9th board meeting.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second that.
Second by Supervisor Wells. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Chairman votes yes, and the motion is approved. It will be tabled until September the 9th. All right, next is a rezoning of Clearbrook Retail Center submitted by Gray Wolf Incorporated. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a rezoning request that was in front of the Planning Commission at the beginning of this year. It went to them first in 2nd of January and was tabled for 45 days and came back in February for their disposal. It is a request to rezone 14.53 acres from RA to B2. That's the Business General District with proffers. Now, this is up in the Stonewall Magisterial District, and to give you some orientation, it is a project or property, if you will, that you're familiar with. Back in 2009, it came in front of you and ultimately was a recommendation of denial by the Board of Supervisors for a similar request. The property outlined in black, of course, is just south of Cedar Hill Road. It's between Interstate 81 and Route 11, and it's just a little north of the Hopewell-Brucetown Road intersection with Route 11. Immediately to the south, you can see there's some B3 property, which is the Clearbrook Business Center, an important property because through that property is the access proposed for this project. As part of the applicant's proposal, they've submitted a generalized development plan. That's part of your application, and I have it on the screen there to your left. And I think very clearly you can see the location of the property, and also within the property, the road, their access, which goes again through the adjacent property to the south out to previously approved intersection on Route 11. You'll note that to the north, which is actually to the right of the screen, we have several residential properties that are in close proximity to this particular project. So that generalized development plan gives some good guidance as to how the project would develop with B2 uses. It also shows the areas that won't be developed, and that is presently in the existing drainfield area adjacent to the residential properties. Those drainfields belong to those residential uses, and in the stormwater management area adjacent to Route 11. As I mentioned, it went to the Planning Commission a couple of times. Initially, the Planning Commission tabled it to give the applicant time to clarify some numbers in the traffic impact analysis, and also to work with the neighboring property owners to make sure some of their issues could be addressed. So the applicant did clarify the TIA numbers to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. They also modified some future interparcel connection opportunities with the applicant, and also some concerns about construction activities and the timing. So then it came back to the Planning Commission on their 20th of February meeting, and the Planning Commission ultimately recommended denial of this rezoning request. And it was primarily based on the transportation impacts, in particular those that were recognized in the application and through the process at the intersection of Route 11 and Hopewell-Brucetown roads. So as we move through those, it's important for me to recognize that the applicant, since the Planning Commission recommended denial, did modify their proffer statement. And to point that out, the one proffer previously proposed that they would provide for engineered design of the Brucetown-Hopewell road intersection with Route 11. Now, that was removed from the package after the Planning Commission's recommendation. In lieu of, then the applicant proffered a $75,000 monetary contribution for transportation improvements at this intersection or at another area of the choosing of the county. So again, that's a modified proffer, and of course that's in your agenda package here this evening. To summarize, that the B2 business general designation is consistent with the Northeast Land Use Plan. The potential impacts to the adjacent properties have been addressed in this application more so than in the previous application, but there are still, of course, impacts that are recognized. And the transportation impacts, as recognized by the Planning Commission, still exist. So that is, of course, something that the Board of Supervisors should evaluate here as we look at this particular rezoning request. Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Board of Supervisors may have, and Mr. Gary Hoots is here representing the application this evening.
Questions of staff? Mr. Oakes, should you wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Question, wait a minute.
And maybe I best wait till Mr. Oates gets up here. It's probably a technical question, and I'd like to ask him. Not that Mr. Reddy probably couldn't answer it, but...
It's not my place. Thank you.
Yes, sir. My name is Gary Oates with Gray Wolf. I spent a little time writing up something, but I'll answer your question first.
I'm just curious. I want to make sure I understand the level of service at the existing Hopewell Road and 11 interchange.
Okay.
I'm looking at that based upon your study that we're looking from A to D at that particular intersection now. Is that correct?
Could you let me know what page you're looking at?
I'm looking at page 16 of your TA. Just looking at the background level of service.
I'm not sure I'm looking at the same page you got my phone.
It's not what I got. Yeah. What's a Stowe Engineering? So is that?
Yeah, is it a particular figure or?
Yeah. Let's see what I got. That's what I got.
$250.
It's Table 3, 2014 background level of service.
All right. All right, sir. Again, what was your question about the,
But when we're talking about background level of service, we're talking about the existing traffic as it's now situated at that particular intersection, and am I correct in saying the level of service is kind of A through D? D is the worst level of service at this point?
yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Sorry it took so long to get there.
Sorry. Pages are numbered differently.
Any other questions? Did you have some comments?
Yes, sir. First, although Mike did it, I just want to go over a little history on this project. About 5 years ago, the owner attempted to do a rezoning, and the person he hired did a horrible job. They proposed a building building out the entire 14 acres. The projected traffic was through the roof. The engineer also neglected to speak to the neighbors and try and address their concerns. The application failed to mitigate its impacts, and it failed, and rightly so. The owner had come to me initially back then and asked me to do the rezoning, and at the time I couldn't take it on. And I watched it go through the process and felt pretty bad for him, because after speaking to him initially, I knew that he was willing to do the right thing if he would have just been advised better on the process. So in the spring of 2011, he came to me and asked if I would consider doing it now. And I agreed, so long as he followed my advice. There was a foreclosed house adjacent to 81. I'm not sure if I can work this good enough. I'd like to get back to the GDP, Mike. It shows up as the Shaw property there, right there at the corner of 81 and Cedar Hill Road. At the time, it was a foreclosed property. I advised my client that he should look at buying that from the bank, since there's a comp plan road going right through it. And we could offer that up as one of the proffers for this project and take that off the table for the county. But Mr. Shaw, he beat us to the punch and made an offer first and got it. Next, I sent a letter to all the neighbors to arrange a meeting. That meeting occurred on June the 8th at Miss Driver's home. I explained to them that the owner was going to apply for rezoning, and I wanted to hear their concerns and get their input. We had a second meeting on July the 18th, and my client offered to include their properties in his rezoning request. He would pay the county and state fees, the proffers, the engineering costs, the cost of the traffic impact analysis, and we sent this out to each neighbor in writing. They decided this would be acceptable if he also paid their increase in real estate taxes for as long as they lived there, pay the $20,000 hookup fees for sewer and water, pay to make the connections, or he could buy their property for 4 times the appraised value. This amounted to huge sums of money, which my client does not have. So we proceeded with the rezoning of just his land. The traffic impact analysis took about 4 months. Once I had it, I could see what we needed to do to mitigate our impacts. Prepared the proffer statement, generalized development plan. I increased the buffers in green areas, excluded gas station uses while the residences were next door, included interparcel connections, and still proffered these in an attempt to still try and work with the neighbors. In May of 2012, I sent these proffers and the GDP to the neighbors at the same time it went to the 13 review agencies. I didn't hear anything back from the neighbors. It took until October to finally get all our reviews back, and at that time I could make the application for public hearing. Notified the owner. It took him a little while to get the $11,450 submittal fee for the county. The application was submitted, and the holidays pushed us back till January at the Planning Commission. At that meeting, the commission asked us to meet with the neighbors one more time to iron out the differences. Met with the neighbors on January the 14th to hear their concerns again. They thought my client should now buy their properties for 1.5 times the appraised value. And I was also told by Ms. Driver that someone had been dumping trash on the property. I took this information back to my client. He said he could not afford to buy their property. Instead, he offered to sell his property to them. The price was half of what commercial property in the area is listed for. He also contacted a contractor to get the trash removed. The offer to purchase was not accepted by the neighbors. We returned to the Planning Commission with an additional proffer to limit construction activity for noise. The commission voted against the rezoning because they felt a proffered time frame of 3 years to conduct a traffic study, and the design plans for Hopewell Brucetown was too long. Their vote for denial was not unanimous. A few months later, the contractor still had not removed the trash. I notified the owner again, and a complaint was filed in the meantime with the zoning department, and this prevented this application from coming forward to you. The contractor finally arrived, cleaned the property, and we were able to proceed. But I just wanted to make sure you understood there was a violation this spring, and that's the reason we have this gap here. I notified planning that we were ready to get on the agenda, and here we are tonight. In the application, as Mike stated, the Planning Commission objected to the design because of the time frame. So instead, I modified the proffer to a $75,000 cash proffer. It can be used for matching funds, Hopewell Brucetown, wherever you decide. And it's the same proffer that I offered up that you approved in my rezoning a few months ago. This land has been designated for commercial land use in the comprehensive plan since 1989. Back then, it was recommended that it could be rezoned when public water and sewer were available. It has remained in the comprehensive plan for the last 24 years as commercial. In 2010, the board adopted a revised Northeast Land Use Plan. The revisions were made to address traffic concerns associated with existing and future development in this region. A new frontage road was proposed through the property to improve traffic flow at exit 321. That section of road is on the GDP tonight, and it's in our proffers. The owner will build it. He's paying his way. The second, there's a real need for shovel-ready sites in the county. Every year, our commercial industrial land inventories decrease. When a business comes looking, they want a site that's ready to build on. Without an increase in businesses to bring in money for our county, the homeowners and residents will have to start paying higher taxes for schools, public services, other projects. It's important to attract businesses with a variety of these shovel-ready sites. Finally, there are 4 adjacent neighbors that are not in favor of this. They'll be speaking to you tonight. My client cannot pay them the money they're looking for. I'd want to point out that the lots they live on, the houses they live in, they were built in the mid-90s. They moved to an area that was already planned to be commercial. There have been other commercial rezonings in the vicinity of this property, and the only difference is this one lands in their backyard. In conclusion, you have before you a rezoning application that meets the land use and transportation requirements of the comprehensive plan. The proffers do mitigate its impacts, and were given a thumbs up by 13 review agencies. Buffering and screening of the neighbors is above and beyond the ordinance requirements. It's a good rezoning application, but again, I can't make all the neighbors happy. I did get some letters of support from some neighbors, and I dropped those off for you to have tonight. Thank you.
Questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Collins.
I know I'm just a simple country attorney, but I am confused by this entire process. Looking at, so this is what you're proffering as a complete rezoning right here?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So in the map that was included in our packet, one piece of property was not highlighted. Is that right?
Well, the highlighted properties were properties already zoned in that color photograph. The one outlined in black is the subject property here tonight.
Okay.
The property south of us, where the road connects through, we'll be accessing Route 11 through there. We won't have any more entrances on Route 11. We'll be giving up the one we do have. And we're giving interparcel connections to everyone along Cedar Hill Road and Route 11 to come through our property. So whenever they are rezoned to commercial, they can close their entrances also.
Okay, and so on that map, the property line is different than on the colored map we have. So that's the Stein property, and no, see that line? That one line doesn't go all the way up to.
Excuse
me.
me.
The road that we're talking about is going over the northern section of the lower part red section. Is that? There's a property line on your map that goes all the way to 81. So I was having a hard time orienting your handwritten map with with the color-coded map? This map?
To my knowledge, they're the same. The road that we're proposing to build, maybe that's what you're looking at, or?
Maybe you could draw point to the location of the road on the photo map.
Draw it.
Okay.
Or is that such a blown-up map that this is that small property down here, so
Right.
that's going all the way,
That's-
okay.
That's it right here.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps if I could help by illustrating on the aerial photograph here, the property and the road that you're talking about. The property for which the rezoning is being requested is going to be highlighted in red. The one to the south that is presently
Pause
red.
for a minute.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. As I asked the question, you're trying to explain, Mr. Reddy, I'm sorry.
The property is exactly the same, but for clarification, I just highlighted the property, and I'll do so again in red, that is the rezoning request is for. The one that is currently in red, which is this one in this location, was rezoned to B3 in 2006. That had access to Route 11. So I'm going to change, well, actually, let me do this. Make it a little bit thicker here.
I guess what's
Yeah, the access to the road, if you will, would be in that location. Okay, so again, that is illustrated on Mr. Oates' generalized development plan on this screen.
Okay, so I guess my problem is, I guess what I'm looking at here is that this drawing is not to scale of the map. Because if that little, where the road's coming in is running along, okay. I guess if you're looking at the I guess what you're calling the Stein property, I'm just trying to orient myself, and maybe I'm the only one having problems doing this.
I think the property that was already zoned red, I'll illustrate again, it's kind of in that location. So if we can forget that property because it was already rezoned, of course, we're looking at this area, and that is absolutely consistent with what was shown on the previous
Well,
map.
I understand that. I guess because I'm looking at this road running across there, and I guess because we're talking about transportation issues, so that was, it still doesn't make sense to me, but you tried. Thank you.
Be happy to continue to try it if you can.
No, it's probably just I can't wrap my head around all the lines and the colors and who goes where and does what.
Of course, this drawing's oriented a little bit differently than north is pointing to the right instead of up on this map.
I understand.
Okay.
Other questions? Thanks, sir. We'll now conduct a public hearing on rezoning 09-12 of Clearbrook Retail Center, submitted by Gray Wolf Incorporated to rezone 14.53 acres from RA Rural Areas District to B2 General Business District with proffers. Property is located on Martinsburg Park, Route 11, 700 feet south of the intersection with Cedar Hill Road, Route 671, frontage Route 11 and 81, and is identified by property identification numbers 33-A-125 in the Stonewall Magisterial District. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this rezoning? Please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, Chairman and Supervisors.
Pull that thing down. There's some guys up here that are beginning to have hearing problems.
I'm Debbie Driver. I live in the Stonewall District, and I'm a adjoining property owner. According to the core values of the Board of Supervisors that were adopted in 2009, this government will protect our rural heritage and direct its future growth through planned infrastructures. With that said, how can any of you approve this rezoning when it destroys a residential subdivision prior to any road infrastructures in place? How does anyone know the impact of the McCassin Distribution Center at this time? The roads are not ready for the properties already rezoned in this area. To add more property into the mix does not make sense at this time. Route 11 is not ready for this piece of the puzzle. If you rezone this property, I personally cannot rezone because I am located in a subdivision. My access to the interparcel connector road is restricted because of neighbors' drain fields, and I would have to hook up to water and sewer. It would cost me a fortune to pursue that avenue. However, to remain as residential devalues my property right out of the gate. What value is residential would my property have with a hotel, restaurant, etc. in my backyard? None of us have heard from the applicant or his representatives to discuss any type of resolve for quite some time. I am concerned that the board would appoint someone to the Planning Commission that is benefiting financially from this rezoning, and so many others in the county too. How can this be right when my county representative is representing one investor over his entire district for his financial gain? I am asking this board to deny this application because the timing is not right for the road infrastructures, the financial burdens, and changed lifestyle for the adjoining property owners would not be in the accordance with the comprehensive plan, and because this has a major conflict of interest from the beginning when presented to you and us by a planning commissioner. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name's Elizabeth Regan. I live in the Stonewall District. I am reading a letter for Elaine McGee, who cannot make it here tonight, and this is her letter. She says, "Good evening. I am sorry that I cannot be here this evening, but I had a conflict, and so I've asked my neighbor to read this statement for me. My name is Elaine McGee. I live in the Stonewall District. I am an adjoining neighbor of this land, and I speak in opposition to this rezoning. The comprehensive plan states that its primary goal is to protect and improve the living environment within Frederick County. Rezoning this property does not improve the living environment of the residential property owners. When I bought my property, which is zoned residential, I did not expect all this commercial business rezoning around me. I am retired, and I expect to live here for a long time. Mistakenly, I expected the zoning to protect my property. Now I wonder why we have zoning restrictions in Frederick County. It's frustrating to see what's happening to the area where I live. But to get to the point of my concerns about this rezoning, transportation has not been adequately addressed. The land use plan states that Route 11 should be expanded to 4 lanes. This has not happened. A traffic analysis study rated this area far below B rating required. The light at Brucetown-Hopewell intersection has not helped the intersection. Now, there is a new warehouse constructed on this section of Route 11. The extra tractor-trailer trucks will definitely not help the impact of traffic in the area. When there is an accident on Interstate 81, the traffic is detoured onto Route 11. Traffic is so backed up that I cannot get out of my driveway. This happens fairly often. Wouldn't it be a good idea to correct these traffic problems before allowing more development to occur? A big construction project on this property is hazardous to the foundation of my house. Blasting could damage the foundation. Who would pay for this? If and when I sell my property, the buyer should have access to the interparcel connector road if the buyer wishes to rezone. An entrance for a commercial business on Route 11 would not be possible. The buyer would need access to this property to develop it for business. I would like to know what the storm management area on the map would look like, a mowed area or left to grow wild as it is now. The property does not look very nice from Route 11. Crime has been an issue on this property. In December, there was a fire and illegal drug activity. In the last week or so, there was more police activity there. Apparently, it's an ongoing drug problem at this location. We ask that something be done about this. This application was denied by the Planning Commission, and I urge you to deny this application as well. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Dan Scholl, and I am the last on the end, right next to 81, lot number 4. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening about the ongoing issue that we have here. I will try not to be repetitive about the other issues that have already been up. We have some very concerned homeowners here. But I just say ditto to what their concerns are and add my own, although it may not have, it may have little or no influence on the overall decision this evening. I'd like to point out my views. Currently, that view is of a vacant field with some wildlife and very quiet. But that will change dramatically, as well as the value of our property and our lifestyles if this is approved. That will be replaced by buildings and blacktop, a lot of trash blowing across the field and ending up on our properties. But that's enough about the quality of life, because I understand there are tax dollars to be gained here if approved, and that's the reason he's trying to get it rezoned. The issues you can consider are legal. Should this parcel be rezoned without having any access to an existing road? I don't know how that could be possible. Right now you have plans and studies, but the truth is the current owner has no plans to build any access roads, but is basing his projections on trying and tying into an adjacent road that, you know, the land that and there hasn't even built yet. And is it, and when will it ever be built? My understanding is that Route 11 is going to be dramatically affected by the amount of traffic that we generated, and that's going to have an adverse effect on many local residents, not just the 5 landowners at the meeting this evening. Lastly, recorded restrictions for the 5 properties do not permit anything to be built except residential properties. And originally, this road that you see is planned to go right through my home, and an exit ramp built off of Cedar Hill Road. Because of the restrictions, I don't see that that could ever happen. So this is going to be a dead-end road coming into the back of a residential area. The only way it can get taken care of is if 3 approvals are required. I don't think that's going to happen. So this will become a worse mess than it already is at the Hopewell Junction intersection if this would be approved. But with your permission, I would like to just quickly point out on the map what is happening and make sure that everybody's in the same understanding. The black outlines property that's being asked for rezoning. The access is on the far left side of the red area that you see on your map, which is not owned by the applicant. Unless this owner puts this road in, then this road is not going to be built. If that ever does happen, this is for drainage, this is sewage, and these are residential areas. So the net effect is you have a parcel here and a parcel here that could be developed. So I'm not sure.
Sir, I have to ask you to conclude. Are you done?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anybody else?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow supervisors. My name is Mark Regan, and I reside in the Stonewall District. My house is adjoined to the applicant's property on Cedar Hill Road. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say I voted for you the last 2 elections to represent the county. I know the board appoints the commissioners. This is close to the amount of tax I paid the county since I moved here. You can multiply that a few or more times to include my fellow neighbors. On page 1 of the handout I gave you there, you will find that our commissioner, Gary Oates, is the applicant for Mr. Vahidi, dated December 5th, 2012. On page 2, you'll find that our Commissioner Gary Oates, along with Mr. Stowe, are listed as Mr. Vahidi's power of attorney, dated December 5th, 2012. On page 3, and this is a news flash, you won't find this news anywhere but here tonight. On December 30th, 2012, a fire broke out at the applicant's property. I asked the applicant, Commissioner Oates, if it was a chimney fire. Well, he said yes. My neighbor told him that's not what he had heard. My neighbor was told that there was some kind of grow room fire. Well, my neighbor was right. Public records you see before you from the Sheriff's Department confirm that it's an ongoing drug case. Page 4 is Tuesday, July 30th. Another event not worthy of making the news is an ongoing theft sting operation at the applicant's property. At about 11:30 p.m., a helicopter and police searched for suspects involved in possible break-ins at the applicant's farm. As you can see, this is definitely not the type of property the county should be involved in. At this time, I want to thank Mr. Moan, Redbud Commissioner, for standing up for the Stonewall District and motioning for denial when neither my Stonewall representatives would do so. And thanks to all the commissioners who voted for denial of the worst application I've seen in Frederick County. Tonight, we need to take the advice of Madam Chair, June Wilmot, who asked for citizens to get involved with the county committees. I agree. I think we need a lot of good citizens to get involved in the county committees. But for goodness sakes, when you take this type of job, please settle all your real estate and financial transactions first. Because when you work on these committees and use it for self-financial gains, you permanently alter the lifestyles of innocent taxpayers. Now with the increasing construction noise, engine brake noise from our friends at Pine Knoll, increase of pollution from car mews, and irreversible traffic growth, this area of Frederick County is nearly uninhabitable. The only solution now would be for the owner to buy us out, and for us to deal with Mr. Vahidi directly. I would have to question the advice he has received for the last 6 or 7 years. I now ask my Stonewall supervisor to motion for denial and ask that all of our supervisors representing Frederick County unanimously vote for denial of the rezoning of 0912. Thank you and have a good evening.
Anyone else?
Evening. My name's Phil Martin. I also have a piece of property that adjoins this project, and I just like to let people know that I'm in a minority here, it seems tonight, but I'm for this project. I'd like to see it move ahead. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Does the applicant wish to make any responses?
Yes, sir. I'll try to respond to a few of them. When I volunteered for the Planning Commission, of course, I told the supervisor, asked me at the time if what I do interferes with it, I would not do it.
I gotta tell you, stick to the item before us. I know that came up, and but.
Okay. Well, I told the neighbors when I met with them, I was there acting as an applicant for the owner and not as their planning commissioner. And through the planning commission process, I abstained and did not interfere with it. And of course, it got turned down at planning commission. So I've kept the two separate. The other item about the, I guess the drugs. From my understanding, there was a kitchen fire in December right after some people had moved in to start renting the house on the property. It was a couple weeks into it. And again, from what I understand, there were some grow lights found on the second floor. Nothing been grown yet. Of course, those people were immediately evicted and nobody's been in the house since. The question about the helicopters and the police sting, there's been a rash of thefts down in that area lately. They've hit Charles Orndorff a couple times. They broke into a building on this property and stole some tools. So the deputy set up a sting and captured the two people that did it because they came back a couple nights later. So that was the involvement of that. It was not drugs. It was breaking up a theft ring that was hitting that neighborhood. Again, I can't make all the neighbors happy. I did my best on this application, trying to advise my client. This has been in the comprehensive plan, like I said, since 1989. We've addressed all the concerns of the agencies, including VDOT. Transportation planner, met with him. We got a thumbs up that we did mitigate our impacts on transportation. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Questions? Thanks, sir. All right, this is Stonewall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Few comments. I think that Mr. Oates has done a good job of trying to address the impacts. I think the owner has been very conscientious and within his means trying to address the concerns. This is a corridor in transition. These are always the toughest land use issues we deal with. There's no question that the corridor is going to continue to transition. It's been land use planned for commercial uses since before any of these homes existed there. I do not believe that the first properties to develop in these instances should be immediately adjacent to existing residential. But long-term, the land use plan speaks for itself. The corridor is in transition. We could see the beginning of it in areas nearby, but not necessarily within sight of the existing residents. So I do think that what the comp plan does not speak to, and in particularly in these transition instances, it's difficult to speak to, and that is timing of an application. When is it really time for that property to develop? And I do not think that the first property adjacent to these homes should be the first one to develop. So I would move to deny rezoning application 0912.
All right, we have a motion to deny. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Hess. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Lofton.
if appropriate, could I ask staff a question? Mr. Bishop, probably, I'm sorry. It's a transportation question. I understand, I believe, from the synopsis of what has transpired up to this point, that the biggest sticking point for, one of the biggest sticking points for the denial of this was the Hopewell Route 11 interchange and the level of service that there, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So I'm wondering, are we basically saying that no more development is going to occur in how big an area because it doesn't appear we can get any acceptable level of service in that area? So are we basically saying that area is just not going to be developed in the near future until VDOT comes up with some magic pot of money and can do the improvements needed?
Frankly, I'd refer you to my comments in the rezoning package, which did not speak to that. You're a little bit asking me to infer into planning commission decision, and that's difficult for me. But I believe what you're saying may be the implication of some of what's been said.
Okay, thank you.
Other discussion? Then I'll assume we're ready to vote. Supervisor Hess, this
Aye.
is a motion to deny.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye, and the rezoning is denied. Next is a public hearing for an amendment to the 2013-14 Capital Improvements Plan, CIP. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This amended 2013-2014 Capital Improvement Plan is in front of you this evening with one project modification. We're seeking the Board of Supervisors' endorsement of the amendment to this CIP and a determination that the CIP is in conformance with the county's 2030 Comprehensive Plan. As we get started here, I want to recognize the Planning Commission addressed this at the last meeting and recommended denial of the amended CIP based on their belief that the amended CIP was not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. But let's recognize that back in January and of this year in 2013, the whole entire capital improvements plan came in front of the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors, and the 2030-2014 capital improvements plan as a whole was recognized to be in conformance with the county's comprehensive plan. We go right to the nuts and bolts of the request to change, and that is under new and modified projects. One additional project has been added under County Administration Projects Priority 4, and that's a joint county school board administration building. The description of that project is very broad, if you will, but it recognizes that it is to be located generally in the county's urban development area. The funding and construction schedule is to be determined. With the addition of that one project and making sure that the capital improvement plan was in good order, one project from the Frederick County Public Schools list, Priority 7, was eliminated, and that is the Frederick County Schools Administration Office expansion and renovation. Again, because that has been combined into the joint project that is now would be recognized in the capital improvement plan. You don't have the whole plan in its entirety in front of you this evening, but of course, the modification in the language is in your agenda and is pretty clear. The table that accompanies the capital improvement plan is also in your agenda, and I have it on the screen here too. And suffice to say that that recognizes, as with all of the projects in the capital improvement plan, it recognizes the removal of priority 7 from the schools and the inclusion under county administration of the county school board joint administration building. So with that overview of the proposed amendment to the 2013-2014 capital improvement plan, I'll be available to answer any questions you may have, but of course this evening we're seeking the Board of Supervisors endorsement of this amended capital improvements plan.
Questions of staff? Thank you, sir.
I have one. I'm sorry.
All right.
I never understood the capital improvements plan is just it's a wish list, correct? It's just kind of giving us an idea of what we prioritize when we have the money, when things are available. Is that my understanding of that?
It's the tool that the county has to help plan and budget community facilities. So it's a prioritized list based upon the inputs of each individual department of the county.
Okay, and so what we're seeking here is to add this project that we haven't, that obviously, the curtain is somewhat pulled here because there is something coming through the pike that we may or may not approve. So I'm not quite sure what why we're required to do this as far as the comprehensive plan is concerned.
Very clearly, all of the projects on the capital improvements plan may or may not be funded during any particular given cycle. There's definitely a connection between the capital improvement plan and the comprehensive plan to make sure that any community facilities public projects are recognized. And as it becomes part of the comprehensive plan, it also satisfies a state code requirement that ensures that all public facilities are consistent with the county's comprehensive plan. So beyond that, I'm sure Mr. Williams could provide some additional guidance too if needed, but it's in essence ensuring the connection between the county's planning documents, comprehensive plan, and future budget expenditures. There's no guarantee that any project will occur at any given time.
If we were to deny this addition, would that block us from having any other conversations about the proposal that's currently going through all the committees?
I defer that question.
We have received a PPEA proposal, which I think the board is aware of. It was unsolicited, not solicited, meaning that you can't anticipate what an unsolicited proposal is going to bring to the board's consideration. Now that it is before us, in order to move forward through the PPEA process, part of the requirement of PPEA is that it be identified in the CIP. The CIP needs to be amended, which is amending the comp plan when you amend the CIP in order to reflect the project so that we can adequately review it as we get through the process. We have not had the opportunity to review it yet. We would like the opportunity because it appears to be interesting. But until we get through this process, we probably should not do any more with it.
Understood. Thank you.
Question. I know we have excerpts from the Planning Commission minutes indicating denial. Wasn't there the inference there or discussion about the Planning Commission referring that to their comprehensive plan committee?
There was discussion to that extent, yes. The Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee was one entity.
And was it referred? Is it being referred to that committee?
No, not presently. It came directly here to the Board of Supervisors.
What might the impact on our ability to consider this? I think that was just answered in the last response from Mr. Riley. If we ask the Planning Commission to refer it to their Comprehensive Plans Committee and then come back to the Planning Commission and then back to the Board of Supervisors? I think you've already answered that. I think basically that
Want to
we
defer
can't
it
consider
until
it.
January, that would probably be the process that it would need to take.
So essentially, we can't consider it until that CIP is amended.
That is part of the PPEA Act. It's
Okay.
not anything that we have determined, it's part of the Act.
Other questions? Supervisor Lofton?
Well, I guess, sitting here listening, I'm still in the fog about exactly what Mr. Riley said. Are you saying that we can't continue to review the proposal without making this change, or that we can?
It would be appropriate and in compliance with the PPE Act if we would amend the CIP to reflect this project in the CIP so we can move forward and review it and discuss it.
When you say move forward, it's to review the aspects. It's not a matter of any indication of approval of the project.
No.
Yeah.
We've only had it for 2 weeks to look at it.
Mr. Chairman, with that in mind, certainly I agree that it's worth reviewing, but I wonder if maybe we haven't got the cart before the horse a little bit, and in fact, why are we striking out the Frederick County School Board's addition? If we do that, it almost looks like, I'm sorry to say, that we are going to move forward with the consolidation of the county and the schools and put an office building someplace that would serve both, when in fact that's not the conclusion we've come to yet. So why remove the county school board addition as part of this?
You could leave them both in there.
That's what I'm wondering, if we could go ahead and do that, because if we find out the proposal doesn't meet the criteria, if it's not a good fit for the county, then if we don't move forward with it, then we'd have to come back and, if we don't receive another proposal, put the addition for the Frederick County School Board back in the CIP. So I'm wondering, why would we want to take it out now?
I think that when I was engaged in part of this conversation, we were trying to figure out what was the clearest thing to do, and it seemed like to have in there what we wanted to look at, to see if it was viable was best. And then we figured if that didn't float, we'd go back and put the school administration building back in there. But if you left them separate, which message is clearer about what it is you're trying to look at to see if it works? I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. When you're on one side of the fence and you look on the other side, if you're really close, sometimes you can't tell which side's the right one.
And I understand, it might
The
create,
school administration remodel fix-up has been there, and we didn't figure it should be there twice. You're right. If there would be a desire, I would think, to put it back in there if this one doesn't go, but we didn't think it looked so good to have it in there twice.
well, I was wondering if they couldn't just coexist, because if we take it out, I'll be honest,
I
I
don't think you'd get any
think
arguments out of anybody if you had it in there twice.
that would certainly be my preference, because
Is that about where we were at with the thing?
It is. It's just a matter of trying to identify the project as it's been proposed. That's all. You just don't want to get in a case where there would be people that would accuse you of building 2 school board administrative offices. Just trying to provide clarity to the proposal, that's all.
and I understand that, but I also look on the flip side and say, well, if you take the school board addition out, then you've basically taken it off the table, and all you're going to consider is.
I got a feeling that there's a good chance if we were sitting here and we went the other way, somebody said, why didn't you take the other one out?
I understand.
I don't know which one's better.
And I don't either. That's why I asked the question.
Somebody else looked like they had a question. No? Ready to go to public hearing? Okay, thanks, sir.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Lofton asked that question, was that going to be a motion to keep the both in the CIP, or was?
Don't take any motion until after the public hearing.
But if
If you get to that end point, Mr. Collins, and you it is the desire of the board to keep both projects in there, that's certainly your prerogative.
But we'd have the public hearing, so we wouldn't have to do a new public hearing.
Correct.
Understood.
Okay, this is a public hearing to consider an amendment to the 2013-14 Capital Improvements Plan, CIP. CIP is a prioritized list of capital projects requested by various county departments and agencies. The plan is created as an informational document to assist in the development of the county's annual budget. Once adopted, the CIP is a component of the 2030 Comprehensive Plan. The county seeks to amend the current CIP to add one project, a new county/school board administration building to be located generally in the county's urban development area. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this amendment to the 2013-14 Capital Improvements Plan? If so, would you come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please?
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Irene Terrell, and I live in the Stonewall District. And I'm somewhat familiar from this proposal from reading the Winchester Star. I would like to remind all of you that this building that we're in right now is only about 18 years old, and it was renovated and added on to specifically for the needs of the county. And I would like to mention also that City Hall, that particular building is over 100 years old, and it was not originally built to be government office space. It was built to be an entertainment center, a live stage theater, and it did have small spaces on the main floor for a courtroom and the city council chambers. So this building is only 18 years old. I'm trying to find justification for this brand-new building that's going to cost anywhere from $40 million to $80 million. A $40 million building sounds pretty palatial. This one is quite nice. I don't understand why you would even want to do this. I don't understand why you would want to ignore the Planning Commission's vote, 9-3, opposing this building. They didn't want to, well, they voted to voted against amending the CIP. Let me correct myself. That's it. So if, why would you want to ignore their advice? The school board, from what I read in the paper, indicated no interest in being in a new building. They're quite happy where they are, and their building was remodeled in 2011 at a cost of $300,000. They don't want to be joined in with this project, so I'm not sure why they're being pulled in. We don't know the cost, between 40 and 80 million. We don't know what the interest rate would be on that loan. That's a huge debt. What is the cost going to be to the taxpayers? We don't know all this. It's proprietary information, but it sounds to me like it doesn't have to stay proprietary. There are no competing proposals. So why in the world would the details of this not be allowed to be known to the taxpayers? I don't understand why it has to remain a secret if there is no competing proposal. It's been suggested that this could be a convenience to the taxpayers, but this building is already centrally located in the county. Where it is right now is convenient where it is. If you move it over on the east side, well, maybe the people in Gainsborough can't get to it as easily. I'm just not seeing a justification for this entire project. If a bridge and some roads were put in, it might encourage some businesses to move in. But since this new building is really not needed, it's not necessary, I would say that you should deny this until a more worthy project comes along for that Russell 150. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. William Barty from the Shawnee District, I think. I was aware, too, from the Winchester Star, and I thank them for printing this article because I had no knowledge of any of this was going on. And from that first article I read here 6 weeks ago or whatever, as the previous speaker said, the school board was not interested. And since then, I've heard with the new Russell project and the new county building on several occasions from different folks that to justify the new county building, you want to bring the school board in and other tenants because the square footage that's for the new building is not going to be fully field with the current staff of the county that you're wishing to move out from downtown. And I can't see leaving downtown either. This is a big burden on the citizens of Frederick County, taxpayers. You're approving something, I would say that 90% of the citizens of Frederick County does not have one idea of what's going on. So I would like the Board of Supervisors, each member, which I think you owe it to the citizens, open government, visibility, no transparency, hold meetings for 3 weeks in your district and let your constituents know what's going on, your citizens, and explain this project to them, to what the benefits are, what are pros and cons, what's the cost analysis, what are you going to do with the old property, what are you going to do with the school property. Put out the information. Let us be part of it. Don't ignore us. We're not totally against it, but we definitely can't be for it at this stage of it, the lack of information, and things are happening. One thing I read someplace was, on the Russell property, $5 million of some money was zeroed out. Where did that money come from? Was it a bond issue? Was it taxpayers' money? Build some confidence in us citizens so we can support valid issues and valid things. Right now, I really don't understand what's going on. Lower commission said this to approve the school board amendment in it, to me, is just a backdoor way to get this amended so you can put the county building into the CIP plan or whatever, because it wasn't originally in there, because you're consolidating together. If you approve the school board add-on, then you're approving the county building in this planning process. And what's the urgent? What's the rush to do this? Take some thought. You guys go out and schedule meetings with your citizens in your district. Discuss it with them. It can be done. Do it for 3 weeks. Put it in the paper. Put it on the local TV stations. This is a tax burden. This is upwards between $40 and $80 million that I've read someplace. That money that's going to have to come off of someplace. Now, if you can sit up there and honestly amend this to do all this stuff without taxpayers' money or county funds, go for it. But don't put all this burden on us without us knowing what's going to be accomplished. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Dodie Stottlemyre, and I live in the Shawnee District. I come before you tonight with no particular hope that anything I have to say is going to influence your proceedings or the vote this evening. I do hope that maybe there's something here that could give people some pause for thought. I'm kind of surprised by the speed with which this amendment came up on the agenda after the Planning Commission, by a majority vote of 9-3 on July 17th, recommended denial of amending the CIP request. I'm wondering why this request couldn't wait until we do the CIP again for next year, what the rush is, honestly. And I do know that the PPEA proposals do require having the CIP listing this as a project on their comprehensive plan, so I guess that would be the reason for the haste. There's a lot of questions about the entire project, from the CDA zeroing out the $5 million in fines and penalties in May, to the intertwining relationships of all the entities involved, and really the total proposed cost, which nobody knows what that's going to be to the taxpayers or to the developers. I do know that the PPA process does take into consideration for approval for their projects the wishes of the local citizens, so all I can suggest is that anyone who has an opinion of the project, even when it is added to the CIP, can contact the appropriate entity on the state level and make their feelings known by letting their own supervisors know how they feel. Thank you.
Next.
My name's George Hughes. I live in the Gainsborough district, and I don't have a clue, and I don't think anybody in here really has a clue what this thing is really going to cost annually if you lease the building, because that's what you're talking about, right? leasing the building back from a developer. So at this point, it's all, everybody's making a big crapshoot. But I do feel very strongly about the reason not to modify the capital improvement plan just on a whim. I was on the planning commission as part of it some years back, and we defended to the very bitter end not busting into the CIP plan without a damn good reason. And there was a lot of battles over it back those years, and I don't think that this is a time that it's time to change that program. I don't see the urgency. I do see why there is an urgency, but I don't see the urgency for the county to jump and run just for the sake of maybe getting a developer off the hook for some hard-to-develop land right at this point. So that's all I have to say. I just don't believe that we should modify the CIP at this point without damn good reason. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I move this thing up? Yes, sir. Gentlemen, my name is Maury McGrew. I live on Double Church Road in Stephen City in the Opeckin District. And I did not come here tonight with any pre-written speech or anything else. I came with my ideas from 50 years of experience as a manager in Washington and in my own businesses. And I have 3 or 4 points that I would like to make. First of all, if the Planning Commission voted, what was it, 9-3 against this thing, what did they know that we as a public don't know? Why would they be against something and you throw it back out there still to consider it? Secondly, transparency. Every one of you has gotten elected to office or appointed to office as a conservative fiscal Republican. Now, if the folks in Washington were as untransparent about what they do, which they are, you would all be against them. But here we are, sitting here, listening to something about a proposal which you dance on the head of a pin to avoid talking about, and we can't know who's involved. Now, that goes to the point of solicitation or unsolicitation. I've been around a long time. I know things can happen without somebody knowing how they happened. Now, I don't believe for 1 minute that that proposal was totally unsolicited. And I'll do respect to all of you. I do not believe that. Somebody somewhere had some input of some kind to get anybody to commit that kind of money. And then the next point would be, if we don't know who these folks are, how do we know what the impact is of what you might do with this proposal? Somebody made that proposal with the idea of making money. Now, don't you think we should know who they are? I don't think it makes any sense not to know that. And then the last point I would make is, it sounds like you're getting ready to make a giant leap into the law of unforeseen consequences. You're trying to change plans to keep yourselves consistent with the law, but yet you don't want to talk about what it is that you're really doing. It makes no sense to me, and I would recommend that you slow down. I don't propose to be against a new building if it's necessary, but I know as a bureaucrat in Washington for many years, bureaucrats have a way of being always wanting more, always needing a bigger office, always needing another machine. We don't always need that stuff. When I was there, we were told to do more with less, and our offices were cut in half twice. So I went from a nice big office to a little cubicle. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Last call. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I think the misinformation that is about and the lack of understanding of the process is pretty incredible. We didn't create the process. We had no input into how the process was created, but we do have a responsibility to live within it. So I think your questions are completely legitimate. I think they deserve answers. I'm confident that those answers will come forth, but we didn't create the process. We have to live with it. I think that, because I sat many years on the Planning Commission, that the bulk of the planning commissioners have a feeling that we should be very consistent about how we do things. And it's my belief that that was the biggest objection to the way this proposal came forth, and that it was an unusual occurrence. But I don't know. They speak for themselves. I have great confidence in them. I think that in order for us to continue to consider what appears to be, from what we know about it thus far, an application that deserves careful and thorough consideration, that we need to amend the comp plan. And I would so move, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion to approve the amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Fisher. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher.
I think we would not be doing our due diligence if we don't take a look at this. I had no knowledge of this. It was unsolicited. What it stands, all those questions that were brought up, I don't disagree with any of them, and to meet with citizens, be glad to. Right now, I don't have enough information to sit down and meet with you, and under the process, we have to work within that. Eventually, it's got to come out to the public. I think right now, for me, I'll cut right to the chase. It needs to be looked at. And I just think without looking at it, I would not be doing what the citizens of Frederick County want me to do. And when we find the information out, Mr. Bartee's right on the spot. If he wants to have some meetings, I'll be glad to sit down with folks and we'll talk about it.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a brief comment. We've had very little information on the board about specifics, and it's been done that on purpose. It's done because that's what the law says it has to be done. It remains secretive to a lot of us because that's what the law says has to be done. I very much am distressed by the misinformation and/or speculation that the media has put out there. There's a lot of guessing, and that guessing, of course, makes everyone think that everything's going to be automatic because we're not talking about it. We're not having discussions about an $80 million project because we don't know it's going to cost an $80 million. We have no idea. But yet, the press, the media, rumors, Facebook, it's $80 million. My God, the county's going to spend $80 million. I'm not in favor of that. It's not, I have not even seen the tip to the iceberg of this proposal, and that's what I've told everyone who's called me. It's really distressing that people believe there's facts out there that are non-existent. When people call me up and say, well, this is what I heard, well, good, I'm glad. I have yet to read that. I don't know where you got that information from. Well, I read it in the Star. Where did the Star get it from? So, Mr. Chairman, I have a problem putting this in the CIP, but I'm going off of our legal counsel and Mr. Riley advising that we have to do this in order for the process of at least looking at the proposal. And I agree with Mr. Fisher. And I've said this in public as well. I'm an elected official. We have a proposal in front of us. It is our duty and our due diligence to at least look at the proposal. Looking, as I made a mention to somebody, it's like kicking tires on, going to a used car lot and kicking tires on a car. Their comment back to me was, well, you wouldn't go looking at cars if you weren't interested. So, but we need to at least look at it. It's been proposed, it's been offered to us, and I think that we would not be doing our job if we didn't at least look at it. I hope that we can make all of this open to the public very, very soon so this speculation ends soon. Thank you.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Lofton.
I agree with other board members. There's just a lot of assumptions out there. There's a lot of speculation out there. And it appears that some people have in their minds that this is a done deal. I would reiterate that I think we would not be doing our jobs if we did not take the opportunity to explore this proposal to its fullest. How else would we know if it was beneficial to the citizens of Winchester and to all the entities involved. And I kind of heard, to follow up on Supervisor Collins' analogy there, I kind of heard that, well, the county wants to buy a new car, otherwise they wouldn't have gone to the car lot and say, I want to look at a new car, when in fact, the actual events of this is the used car salesman came to us and said, we see you're driving a car that's this old and this type, and we think you could do better with a new car. So it's not like I went to the car lot came to us. And again, I don't think we'd be doing our citizens any favors by not exploring this proposal to its fullest, and by incorporating this into the CIP does not make it a done deal, does not make it already approved. It just makes it legal for us to continue to explore the proposal.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm new to the board, and this was out there before I even took the seat. I knew it was there when I was asked to fill in. But I've been on the Public Works Committee for over 10 years, and it's not new to have proposals that are proprietary, where we have closed-door sessions to discuss those. So it's not, I feel like everybody else. I listened to this, and it just seems to me I don't know where the information is coming from. It's not behind door politics. We've done this before with other things, not necessarily this particular building, and not necessarily with the having to change the comprehensive plan in order to enter and to look at it. But we have had other proposals in my 10 years, numerous ones, where we have said this is proprietary, and we have to we can't announce all these people's names are involved. If you do that, the deal doesn't get done. There's not a chance, because you never get the chance to discuss that. So legally, we have to do those kinds of things. I'm not an advocate for changing the Planning Commission. I don't think they were against the idea of a building. They are stating their philosophy and ideas about making a change to the plan. And I understand that concern. And then I'm on the other side saying, well, if we don't do that, we just throw this out and we don't discuss it at all. And based on that, I think I'm brand new, but I really do think it deserves some discussion. It also deserves, as citizens, you all deserve to know more about it. I think you will very quickly. I'm like everyone else. There's not a whole lot of knowledge floating out there for us to disseminate to you until we get into more of this, and very quickly that will come out. It's not a done deal. It's not something that's going to happen, and it's a long-term strategy that has to be put together. And I think everybody will be involved. I think the board will be involved, citizens will be involved, and have an opportunity to decide whether this is good for the county or not. The other thing that bothers me is that I come from a school board background, and I've talked to several people. In fact, one of the school board members is a member of the Public Works Committee that participates in this, and I never got the feeling that they weren't interested. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that came from at all. I taught at Klein Elementary School when it was 300 kids, and I look at the school now, and it's probably the most unsecure building we have as far as our school system goes. So I just don't know where that came from. I don't know where the paper just picked that up, because a lot of people I've talked to that are in the school system have said they're interested in taking a look at it. They're like me. They don't know yet exactly where it will go. But they haven't said, no, we're just not interested at all. Don't want to move. Love it here. I haven't heard that at all.
Any other discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think there were a lot of very valid questions asked by the speakers, and if those questions were not answered in the public arena, I, too, would not vote in favor of the building. But I think we owe it to the possibility that this may be in the long-term best interest of the county. I don't know whether it is, but I think we owe it to the county to look into the matter, to see if it is beneficial in the long term. And I just wanted to make sure that it's understood that this vote tonight is not a step in the approval process. It is a step to enable us to take a look at whether this proposal would work for the county.
Well, I guess everybody else has spoke, so I'll say something. I think some of the questions, a lot of the questions that were asked, we'll never know the answer to unless we do as we've been instructed, which requires us to amend the CIP so we can find out what the answer to those questions are. We don't dictate how long a proposal is before us or how long it's good for. So, I want the answers to those questions too, and I'm anxious to see how they pan out. Are we ready to vote?
Just one other thing, Mr. Chairman, it was mentioned about the school board. Didn't we receive a letter from the school board requesting that they be included? That in fact, the information that was initially brought to us was just a proposal for a county administration building, and when the school board learned of it, like we did, and the public did, when this was mentioned at the original hearing, that we received a letter from the school board asking that they be included in the project.
You are correct.
I thought so, yeah.
Other discussion? Hearing none. Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton. No, Collins, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton, or DeHaven, I'm getting all
Aye.
mixed up here. We'll get it right. Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor Wells, my vision is losing me. Chairman votes aye, and the CIP is amended. Next is an ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165, zoning, Article 1, general provisions, amendments, and conditional use permits. Go ahead now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a proposed revision to the zoning ordinance to include what's called temporary family health care structures, also referred to as med cottages sometimes, as a permitted use in the RA, RP, R5, and R4 zoning districts. Now, the Code of Virginia requires localities to permit these structures as permitted accessory uses in all residential zoning districts where single-family detached dwellings are permitted. So we've added this use to the districts that I outlined, and we've also drafted a number of supplementary use regulations that correspond to the use that are consistent with the state code. So these are a couple pictures of what the structures look like. The pictures are also included in your agenda. The board discussed this back on June 12th, forwarded it to the Planning Commission for public hearing. The Planning Commission held a public hearing at their July 17th meeting, and they did recommend approval of the amendment. So tonight we're seeking a decision from the board on this proposed amendment, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Questions of staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll conduct a public hearing on this ordinance amendment, Frederick County Code, Chapter 165 zoning, Article 1, general provisions, amendments, and conditional use permits, Part 101, general provisions, Section 165-101.02, definitions and word usage. Article 2, supplementary use regulations, parking, buffers, and regulations for specific uses, Part 204. Additional regulations for specific uses, Article 4, agricultural and residential districts, Part 401, RA Rural Areas District, Section 165-401.02, permitted uses, Part 402-RP Residential Performance District, Section 165-402.02, permitted uses, proposed revisions to allow temporary family health care structures as a permitted use. Is there anyone here who would like to speak either for or against this ordinance amendment? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we have a motion to approve by Supervisor Hess. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Lofton. Discussion. Hearing none. Supervisor Wells.
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton.
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven.
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher.
Aye.
Supervisor Collins.
Aye.
Supervisor Hess.
Aye.
Chairman votes Aye, and the motion passes. The ordinance amendment is approved. Other planning items, Master Development Plan 01-13 of Shenandoah. Go ahead.
Again, thank you. The Shenandoah Master Development Plan depicts the development of 926 acres of land that is zoned R5, which is the Residential Recreational Community District. This proposal shows a total of 2,130 residential units. This includes the 230 existing platted lots within the subdivision that were previously developed. So this development was originally zoned back in 1975 and was master planned in 1991 and revised in 2001 and 2007. If you're familiar with the development, the existing primary access to the development is located on Route 522 South via what's called Lake Frederick Drive. It's also the access point to the lake that's in the property. It's a signalized entrance that's been on flash mode for quite a while. So the primary purpose behind this master plan revision is to remove the age-restricted requirement for the majority of the residential units that are located on the east side of Lake Frederick that were approved with the 2001 master plan. Under the new master plan that's before you, the land area west of Lake Frederick will consist entirely of age-restricted dwellings. There'll be a total of 517 age-restricted units on that side of the lake, and they will continue to be served by private streets. Now, the land area east of Lake Frederick will consist primarily of traditional residential units. There will be 76 age-restricted units in that section, as well as about 1,537 traditional units. Now, the housing located on the east side of the lake will include a mix of single-family detached and attached units, and they will be served by public streets with the exception of the 76 age-restricted units, which will have their own private streets. The master plan also includes a request to the Board of Supervisors to sever the residential component of this development from the commercial component of the development, which are owned by two separate entities. Now, I would note that the Board of Supervisors has acted on master plan severing on two previous occasions. First, for the Sovereign Village, Lynn Haven, Twin Lakes Overlook Master Plan, and then more recently, the Snowden Bridge Master Plan. So this is an excerpt from the master plan included in your agenda. It shows the road layout as well as the phasing of the development in a little more detail. This was also included in your development. It shows the roads as well as the areas for the land bays and the types of uses that are being proposed, such as single-family detached or single-family attached. So to sum up the request, the master plan for the Shenandoah development is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. The master plan itself that is being presented to the board is only being presented as an informational item, and there is no action required on the actual master plan. We are, however, seeking action from the board on the applicant's request to sever the residential and commercial land bays. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have, and should you have questions for the applicant, they are represented by Mr. Ty Lawson, who is here tonight.
Before we do the questions to staff, so the staff can correct me, in case anybody's confused here, my take on it is that the Planning Commission tabled a decision that was not theirs. It was our decision, and things happen. So because they had no authority to table the decision, but did it anyway and thought they did, it had to come on through. They, like us, got a master plan with no action required. The decision to sever is ours, not Planning Commission, so a table wasn't a proper thing. Did I get that right, Mr. Riley?
Yes, sir.
Staff, you
Yes,
got
sir.
where we are
Yes, sir.
tonight. So, questions to staff on, certainly you can ask about the master development plan, but it's for information, or questions on the action before you, which is to sever the master plan. I guess in some respects, maybe the master plan doesn't exist if you don't sever it, but I'll let the lawyers work on that one. Questions? Yes, sir.
One question. Obviously, the commercial component of this that wants to be severed out of here, were there any interparcel connections that would be affected? Because if someone wanted to visit those commercial entities, would they have to go out to 522 and then access them there? Or would they be able to access them through?
The commercial land bays access via Lake Frederick Drive, which is already constructed along the frontage of the commercial land bay. So they currently have their access point already in place.
Okay.
That access point is on a public road?
That's the entire section of Lake Frederick from 522 into the property will need to become a private road in order to access the new land base.
It's public.
Is it already a public street? Okay, my apologies. So that section is already a public street and then becomes private on the other side of the lake. My apologies.
There was a reference made to our two previous experiences with this type thing. The first one was a disaster that I don't want to have to go through again. The second one hasn't fouled up yet. So it may work out okay. That's our history. Other people may have a different opinion, but that's mine. Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I understand. I think I understand what you're saying. So when you say a land bay, what are you meaning by land bay?
The commercial acreage and the residential acreage are two separate land bays.
So what we're saying is that we're going to separate. We're going to take the commercial out of the master plan now and just have. So what happens to that commercial property?
Commercial property would still be covered under the existing approved master plan. So they would be under one previously approved master plan. The residential portion would be under a new approved master plan.
Now, the portion where they remove the age restrictions, we have no control over that, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Well, a motion on the decision to sever or not to sever would be in order.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we sever the commercial and the residential land base for master plan purposes.
We have a motion to approve the sever. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second by Supervisor Collins. Discussion.
Mr. Chair. Oh, sorry.
If I may, since this is in the Opecon district, several constituents have contacted me about this. Some in favor and some not. But I think the nicest part about the whole thing, I heard this is one of the nicest communities that you could possibly want to live in. They went on and on about the people that live there now. The biggest concern is the age-restricted community that is there now and what is going to happen to their property values and their age-restricted houses and so forth once these changes are made. They understand that they have no control over that. They understand I have no control over that. But they did ask me to make a comment to the developers, and I will do that so it becomes public record, that they're requesting, I'm requesting that the developers do everything they possibly can to work with these folks who have invested money and time and their livelihoods into these properties and enjoy being there, to do whatever they can to keep them in a age-restricted environment and not just to open the gates up and surround them with multifamily houses or single-family houses full of children and so forth and so on. And so I wanted to put that out there. These are good people asking for consideration. And I have, so they will know, talked with the developers' representatives. And I did so today and a couple of days ago, and I'm getting good feedback that these things will be addressed and have been addressed or being addressed again. So I feel very comfortable with that. I'm always open for those discussions, and if we find that's not taking place, we'll push hard to make sure it's happening for you. Thank you.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment. This is the second, I believe, in the year that we've had a master plan that was originally done as an age-restricted rezoning, that the planners have come back and just simply removed that without any pomp or circumstance, because the law allows them to do that. And of course, we gave them proffers or reduced proffers based upon you're going to be an age-restricted neighborhood. And now we can't go back on our proffers, but they can go back and put in single-family homes, which are going to impact our schools and everything else. And it concerns me that we can't tighten up our rules or we can't tighten up the law that I'm going to be very hesitant in the future to approve any age-restricted properties that is just so easily done that they walk out of here the day they get their master plan approved and then decide that within minutes to change it from age-restricted to a normal residential neighborhood and not have to pay the additional proffers that every other developer has to do. Just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Fisher?
I've been contacted by some folks down there too, and that probably is not relevant to the severance of these two land bays. But however, it's my opinion that the severing of these is not in the best interest, and I'm not going to be able to support the motion. I just want to state that before we can vote.
Other discussion?
Along with what you were talking about, not being able to change that, I do believe that if a citizen feels strongly enough about it, they can contact the Planning Commission and make known that they would like to have some changes made in the zoning ordinances in the county that might have some effect on the age-restricted classifications being completely dropped once those are done. I can't do that as your supervisor, but I can suggest you might want to look into that with your planning commission here in Frederick County.
Well, I'm sort of reluctant to go here too, and I guess council and administrator can jerk me if it somewhat depends on where the age-restricted issue came from. If it was a proffer on a rezoning, it's a lot different than a notation on a master plan. So when a master plan changes, you're right. One has to think like that. But if it was a proffered, then it's a whole different issue. So we inherited some things.
Yes, we did. And Mr. Chairman, I was not making a comment about this particular subdivision. I want to make that clear. I was shot a few looks by a certain attorney in the back, but that.
Just ignore him.
I'm trying, but you know. That was not a comment necessarily made at this particular subdivision. It's just it's an issue that's come up before, and I have a feeling it's going to come up again. And I just want to make my comments now.
Well, I think there are still some things out there that we inherited that we didn't like, and when times and economics and ownership changed, we did seek to improve our position, and lots of times that happened via master plans. The only vehicle that we had, rather than put somebody through a rezoning that they may or may not wanted to do. Hopefully, we just outlive most of them. Are we ready to vote? All right. The motion is to approve the sever. Supervisor Wells?
Aye.
Supervisor Lofton?
Aye.
Supervisor DeHaven?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
No.
Supervisor Collins?
Aye.
Supervisor Hess?
No.
Chairman votes no. It passes 4-3. The sever is approved. Board liaison reports, are there any? All right, then we'll move on to citizen comments. This is the portion of the meeting that the board sets aside for citizens to address the board on any topic. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? If so, please come forward, give your name, magisterial district, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Is there anyone? Seeing. Yes, sir. Would you like to address the board?
Make one?
Yes, sir.
I just want you all to know that I understand what you did here tonight. Having been a bureaucrat and having followed procedures, you're going through the motions to do what you're supposed to do right, and I appreciate that. But I just wanted to get my oar in the water to let you know when this thing comes back before you, I'm going to be here watching you real carefully. Thank you.
Board of Supervisors comments. Well, I have one that I'm just going to try out there this evening for the heck of it. I heard you all say you're going to watch what we're doing. I hope those of you who have citizen groups are not fabricating information in order to increase your attendance, your meetings, and the desire of people to become engaged, and that you'll try as diligently as we are to make sure that accurate information is for people and not trying to excite the masses. So I'm sorry if that's not what you want to hear from me, but you said it to me, I hold you to the same standard. Okay? Anyone else? Board? All right. Wake up.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to adjourn in a second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no. Meeting adjourned.